Having a niece for about 3 years has introduced me to some things. For instance,
Bluey!
If that kind of introduction sounds familiar, that's because I did something similar last year when I made that video counting down my picks for the top 30 Bluey episodes, during that time after I got another niece. Yup. Anyway, since a year had passed and new episodes have been released, I figured it was time to give the list an update. This time, I'll be counting down the top 100 Bluey episodes. This list was sure to fluctuate anyway, even without new Bluey episodes, but why keep you updated online if we don't have new episodes released? Do you have any idea how taxing that would be? I got the idea for this video off of Blueyfest, which took over ABC Kids in November 2023. I was unable to watch it because I don't live in Australia. But anyway, when the rankings were all in, people were definitely in a wave of confusion over how some of the lower ranked episodes like Blue Mountains and Fairies were placed higher than episodes like Space and Copycat. But let's also not forget that these episodes were ranked based on votes by the fans, and it wasn't just adults that voted. Most of these votes were from kids who also watch the show, and kids have a different perspective than adults, so it would be understandable if kids don't entirely appreciate concepts talked about in some of the deeper episodes, like onesies and flat pack. Anyway, ever since the whole Blueyfest thing, I've thought about having a top 100 list of my own displayed. Not only was an extended listing from the top 30 list, but it's also an update. Some episodes that were only honorable mentions in the last video may actually get a placement in the top 30 now, or because of new episodes released, some may also be among the top 30. I may even include episodes that weren't even mentioned or shown in the top 30 video. That's how big this new list has gotten. I didn't want to make this list sooner because I wanted to wait for Season 3 to be completed. Before I begin counting down, here's a few things to make clear. At the time this video is being published, there are currently 154 episodes, expected to change in the future. Plus, it's all my personal opinion. As I've stated in the previous video, everyone has their own thoughts on the show and what episodes are their favorites. It's perfectly acceptable because the show has so many brilliant episodes that ranking them in order really would be a challenge. That's why the list is always subject to fluctuation. But anyway, I've said enough. Get ready for a 2.5 hour long marathon. It's the top 100 Bluey episodes.
This episode of Bluey is called Daddy Robot.
Most Season 1 episodes were much more simple in nature compared to most episodes from later seasons. In this one, the simplicity is in how discipline can be fun for the kids while also teaching them a lesson. First, Mom instructs the girls to clean up the playroom. Next, the girls turn to Daddy Robot to clean up the mess for them.
Yes, Master.
But then they make the mistake of saying they never want to tidy the playroom again, and the directives change so that the girls are to be kept out of the playroom because they are the reason the playroom is always messy.
If I throw you in wheelie bin, playroom will always be tidy. And then you will never have to tidy playroom ever again. What? It's a solid plan, Master.
Definitely unconventional for most parents, but even after some shenanigans, it actually turned out to be an effective way to discipline the kids so they'd understand the message of the day. You make a mess, it's on you to clean it up, and no shortcuts. And the Daddy Robot malfunctions bring about Bandit at his most dorky. And what about when we see Daddy Robot and Mummy Robot together as the kids finally tidy up? Only 4 episodes in and we watch the parents kiss. Goes to show how real the relationship between them is. What a great way to kick off the second season after the beautiful Christmas experience of the first. Bingo is upset after Dad eats her last fry, or chip.
Hey, where's my chip? Daddy! What?
So she's given 3 chances to use her dance mode. How it works is, she flicks her parents' tail down and they start dancing. And it's always in the most awkward spots, like in the middle of a crosswalk.
Woo! Shake it, chillin'!
Or in the post office.
I'm fine, just ignore this.
But unfortunately for Bingo, she never gets the opportunity to speak for herself when she wants the dance mode to be used.
This is not good parenting.
You've probably seen episodes before this one where you felt bad for Bingo. It's never a fun feeling seeing a 4-year-old deal with this kind of trouble. Bingo's a sensitive kid, and when you watch this episode, you get to really feel it from how her environment treats her. It makes it pretty hard for her to say no.
Bingo, sometimes does your outside voice say yes when your inside voice really means no?
Oh yeah, like this.
But then it starts getting fun again when they go back to the street busker and one last dance mode is activated to close off the episode of the bag.
Here we go! Yes! Yeah!
This episode of Blue is called Mount Mum and Dad.
What we have here is a tortoise and hare story, but with a small twist. After a long day at an amusement park, Bandit and Chili decide to take a well-deserved rest in the living room. The kids then decide to have a race to see who can reach the top of Mount Mum and Dad. But Bluey, being the far more competitive one, will always be the one trying to get ahead to reach the top, while Bingo takes it slow.
Beep, photo. Bingo, what are you doing? We're racing.
After encountering a few perils on the mountain and taking a break with Bingo, Bluey starts to realize that only through teamwork can they reach the summit. See, that's the twist in the tortoise and hare story. Instead of the hare just taking a rest on her own volition, still believing there's no way the tortoise can win, only to be gravely disappointed, the hare rests with the tortoise and cooperates with her to reach the goal. Slow and steady wins the race, but so does teamwork. So really, this episode is a double whammy when it comes to delivering messages. It delivers two at once. You can have competition in plenty of places, just not Mount Mum and Dad.
That is the mountain way.
This episode of Bluey is called Favorite Thing.
The title reminds me of that number from The Sound of Music. But in this episode, the family plays the Favorite Things game. Bluey starts by sharing that hers was during morning tea when Bingo was trying to eat cherry tomatoes, but mixes up her words.
This is difficult.
Bingo feels embarrassed, so the family tries to cheer her up, even bending the rules by sharing their favorite things, or in Bandit's case, least favorite thing of the day, all of which involving Bingo.
Dad knows nothing.
But nothing they did cheered her up. I gotta say, this is one tough nut to crack. Difficult even. I'm sorry.
Are you still upset with me? No. Oh, you are.
Man, if any episode has a strong relatability factor for me personally, it's this one. The way Bingo's still upset even after all those attempts to cheer her up, even if it's not her intention, it kinda does feel like it's on purpose. I've been that way myself if I must confess something.
But you're still trying to make me feel sad.
This episode actually made me realize just how annoying it really is, and presented it in a way that felt satisfying once everyone was happy again. That's how I like to see the healers. I would not have it any other way. Dudes!
Thanks, dude. This episode of Bluey is called Butterflies.
This is the first episode where we see Judo, often ranked among the least popular Bluey characters. Some would even go so far to say they hate this character, and honestly, I don't think that's exactly fair.
I know that. Bluey's my friend.
I mean, yeah, her actions aren't quite what we call nice. While playing a game of butterflies with Bluey and Bingo, she gets impatient waiting for Bingo to emerge from her cocoon and convinces Bluey to abandon her. Okay, pretty cruel. It did make Bingo upset, and then Bluey went to apologize, and she started tearing up when Bingo didn't respond at first, but just an innocent little song and everything's okay again.
No one to blow his nose. Ching, ching.
I feel like people judge Judo harshly because of her actions alone, even though Bluey herself has exhibited behaviors not unlike Judo's in a few episodes. Not to mention, Judo's appearances, especially as a major character, are actually quite rare, so it honestly feels even less fair to give such harsh judgment. I can understand if Judo never learned from this experience, but she did. After Bluey ran off to apologize to Bingo for leaving her, she soon came to realize how it feels for someone to leave her. Maybe this episode didn't leave the best first impression of Judo, but give her a chance. She gets better in future appearances.
episode of Bluey is called Early Baby.
Ah yes, the concept of premature birth. Though it's really only half of what this episode presents, but the whole gist is that Rusty and Indy's games get ruined by some kind of mishap that mixes the two together.
Hello, Dr. Ladies. You sell crackers?
Indy was playing a game where she delivers an early baby as a way to reflect on her sister's birth.
Hello.
And Rusty was playing a game where he's a brave knight rescuing a princess from a dragon.
I command you to free the king's daughter. Never.
When the mishap takes place, the two tell their sides of the story in order to settle the conflict. And to think it was all because Rusty wanted the portrayal of the king's daughter to look more realistic.
You should see instead. It looked more like a daughter.
Gosh dang it, you just had to do it to the parents, didn't you? You just had to have kids play a game about a mother making a premature delivery, and in a delicate way. But I think what's even more fascinating is the way the two games collide as a result of the misunderstanding. With both cases, we're right back to where we started once the perspectives are over and the conflict is cleared up, as is the rain that goes throughout the episode up until everything is settled. Don't you just love art? And then Rusty and Indy decide to play mums and dads, which totally won't result in any conflict whatsoever, right? Right? Well, why don't you watch the very next episode and find out?
This episode of Bluey is called Fancy Restaurant.
How easy would you imagine maintaining a relationship with your spouse would be while you got kids to raise? Well, actually, not quite easy. It's not often a kids show would depict something like this. The kids want to see their parents kiss, so they settle on setting up a fancy restaurant to let the romance settle in enough for the kiss, which comes with some lovely romance music.
Oh, what's this? Some romance music.
Oh, it's lovely!
Bandit's clearly forgotten how to be romantic, and it's all put to the ultimate test when the kids bring their meal to them. You'll probably remember the first time Bandit and Chili kissed in the show in the episode Daddy Robot, and it seemed like it really sells the relationship between the two. Fancy Restaurant made me realize that it was more the way they cooperated with each other that made the relationship feel real. In this episode, the love Bandit has for Chili is demonstrated as it looked like the kids' little hearts are being broken as Chili struggles to find the right words to explain why she wouldn't eat this sloppy mess for real. In that act of love for both his children and his wife, Bandit takes the fall and eats the whole thing. See, romance isn't all about such things as smoochy kisses, it's more about how much you're willing to sacrifice for those you care about, even your own stomach.
This episode of Bluey is called Barky Boats.
A show targeted for little kids features an episode about how tough it is to grow up. Calypso's class gets to meet their 12-year-old buddies today. Bluey's paired up with Mia, Mackenzie's paired up with Captain, and the buddies are both nervous about their impending start in high school. Another funny thing to notice how Blue and Mackenzie don't seem to get along in this episode. This started after Winton makes an embarrassing comment.
Ooh, Bluey's gonna marry Kenzie. No, she's not.
Okay, I don't get it either, but it turns out that there's really nothing to be embarrassed about. It's all thanks to this great dynamic between Mia and Captain. They're just perfect for each other if they both have something to look forward to while they're dreading their next step. That's why they keep coming to each other even when their younger buddy doesn't want to join them.
What are you doing here? She made me come.
It's the whole Barky Boats river that ties them together. As tough as it is to grow up, inevitably, you're going to think about those simpler times as consolation. It's that consolation that stays with you as you move on to those bigger steps towards a bright future.
This episode of Bluey is called Daddy Drop-Off.
This episode introduces us to Leela, a Maltese who quickly becomes Bingo's best friend in kindergarten. Even though Leela narrates the story, really we start at the Healers as Bandit's taking Bluey and Bingo to drop them off at their respective education facilities. Okay, seems pretty normal for an everyday family portrayed as pooches. But here's the kicker, they're running late, and just as Bandit dropped off Bingo and was about to hurry Bluey to her school, Bingo reminds him of one little practice he usually takes part in while dropping her off.
Wind, 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 and one for good luck. Wind, and release! See you,
It's that special little something that allows for the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Even though he was running late to drop Bluey off, he decides to wind Bingo up anyway so she'd march into kindergarten. Just imagine how boring it would be for poor Leela without that little moment. Leela is a shy kid, making it not so easy to make friends. But with Bingo being wound up and marching in, it makes for a silly entrance that makes them instantly bond. Just think, throughout their whole academic career, even through high school graduation, they're still going to be best friends.
This episode of Blue is called Veranda Santa.
The season 1 finale is a Christmas special, and Christmas in Australia sure looks different from Christmas in America, doesn't it? For this season, Bluey and Bingo play a game of Veranda Santa with their father and cousins. The idea is that the children would be asleep, and Veranda Santa would deliver gifts to them, but only if the children are still asleep.
What? Naughty children! You peeked at Santa!
But when Socks ends up biting Bluey's hand, out of anger, she purposely excludes Socks from the game.
Oh, I guess Veranda Santa doesn't give presents to kids who bite people.
Bluey!
She bit me!
We already get the gist that Santa only delivers gifts to the good children, so naturally the children ought to best behave themselves.
Bluey!
Sorry!
But the gifts aren't the reason you should be good, especially during the holidays. The other 11 months of the year aren't a free pass to be a jerk. Maybe it doesn't sound like it would make as much of a difference since the episode does indeed take place in December, but the result of Bluey excluding Socks the way she did wouldn't have been any different if it was any other month. Your actions do leave an impact on others, and you want to make sure the impact is a positive one. If it's negative, use your kindness to make it positive again. A common message for Christmas stories, but honestly, one of the best to offer.
This episode of Bluey is called Circus.
The beginning of this episode establishes that it takes place during Election Day. Is Bluey about to get political now? Well, sort of. While the parents are out to vote, the kids pretend to run a circus, with Bluey as the ringmaster. The ringmaster's objective is to instruct the performers in the best way possible so they can give the best performance possible. But as a side issue, Winton is stuck as a jump in a motorcycle game with his big kid named Hercules. But when Hercules starts interfering with the circus game, Bluey eventually steps in so he can sort out a problem among the circus staff, Mackenzie the Lion Tamer's mistreatment of Honey the Lion. Hercules is another character that has often been considered a least favorite of the show, and just like with Judo, I feel like the hate towards this character is pretty unjustified. Admittedly though, first impressions weren't even that great. The way he treated Winton and then forced a few others into joining his motorcycle game made him out to be a bully. It's neat how the other kids try and stand up to him, even if that doesn't work out how they expected.
Fine, I'll just stand here and do this.
But what saves this character is his redemption arc. The way he saw Mackenzie treating Honey made him realize the error of his ways and showed the Lion Tamer what's what. Even if people acknowledge this part, they still don't accept it as valid. I can only take this as bias and they didn't like how they had to watch Mackenzie get spun around like that, considering he's quite a popular character. But he deserved it for treating Honey like crap. All Hercules really did was recognize that others should play with him by choice, not by force.
This episode of Bluey is called Barbecue.
One of the more innocent episodes of the show. Uncle Stripe and his family stop by the house for a bobby, and while the kids wait to eat, they have a pretend bobby of their own. The funny thing, though, is that Bingo just wants to relax in her relaxing chair, but is constantly required to get out of her seat to gather ingredients for the salad. This includes different colored peppers, or capsicum if you live in Australia.
Zoc said she likes green capsicum the best. Zoc said she likes green peppers the best.
And mud for the salad dressing.
Now I'll fill up my jar.
This is a relatable episode because I love my relaxation, but sometimes I keep having to do chores to what seems like no end. I just want to relax. Man, what a routine for Bingo. She gets out of her relaxing chair, she needs to relax, she gets the bowl, the peppers, the dressing, cleans up the muddy paw print she dragged to the house, sometimes causing Bandit to drop his soda with her antics.
And then...
Hey! Bingo!
But the highlight of the episode is clearly the hose going haywire while she's getting the mud for the dressing. It's like a classic cartoon, the way the hose moves and causes it to rain on the deck. Definitely one of the wackier moments of the show. But the most important thing to remember in this episode...
Isn't anyone going to mention the salads? Everyone! This episode of Bluey is called Movies.
Bandit takes the girls out for their first experience at the movie theater, where they watch an innocent little family film called Chunky Chimp. The plot involves a chimp named Chunky who wants to leave Tree World behind and explore the Groundlands. It takes on a journey to find the magic pine cone. Yeah, sounds pretty standard, but a generic musical makes sense for a child's first feature film experience, especially if it's one from America, as clearly indicated by the accents.
I wish I wasn't different.
Oh man, the songs.
I wish I were the same.
Two conflicts arise from this experience, however. One is that it's clearly by Bluey's desire to watch, so Bingo, not being invested, would rather goof off in the theater, while Bandit has to keep her under control. The other is that Bluey's dreading an impending thunderstorm that takes place during the film's climax.
There's a big thunderstorm bit at the end. That might be scary for some kids.
Oh, I think I might be some kids.
I feel like it connected to me on a personal level because I love the film industry. It's sort of a reminder to me that films like the fictional work shown in the episode tend to follow certain tropes because in a way it connects to real life, much like Bluey itself does.
But I want to go down there.
No, you have to stay here with me.
But I want to explore.
When people talk about criticisms with the episode, it's about the kids being out of character, especially with Bluey dreading the thunderstorm and Bingo running amok in the theater. But this isn't even the first time Bluey's had to overcome a fear, and having fear of certain things that can happen in a movie theater is perfectly normal for some kids. As for Bingo, let's just say she's in one of her hyper episodes that kids her age have from time to time. But overall, it's just monkeys singing songs. Don't think so deep into it, and just consider the episode for what it is.
This episode of Bluey is called Bidnight.
The story in this episode is more told to us rather than shown. Well, each week, the healers roll the rubbish bins out to the street. In this one, there's a new kid in Bingo's kindergarten class. When she tries to be his friend, things don't start off too nice.
Banjo called me a bobo head.
What's a bobo head?
I don't know.
Did he call anyone else a bobo head?
Yeah, he called everyone a bobo head.
Oh, okay.
The new kid is mean to her and the others, and during these intervals of the mornings when the garbage truck stops by, Mom offers Bingo advice on how to deal with this new kid. But then when the new kid got his own feelings hurt, he became Bingo's friend.
He threw Banjo's hat in the bubble up.
Oh,
It made Banjo cry. So I played with him in the sandpit. We're friends now.
Like with Circus, Bidnight really showed how amazing it is that a bully can become a friend if things go just right. But even though that's the major focus of the episode, that's not the only noteworthy thing. Because why would it be? We're not even shown any of it. What we see is Bluey wearing a gi each night, showing that she's been taking karate lessons. Then each morning she'd play a note on a recorder to scare away the crow, and she's been taking notice of the moon phases, as evident by the end of the episode.
It's only both bins when the moon is a big moon, or a half moon, or a no moon. And tonight's not any of them.
Another cleverly written episode that gives you more than what you see.
This episode of Bluey is called Gag Baby.
So far, this is the only episode Disney is unwilling to have put on the air or even on Disney+. Their reasoning is due to the subject matter. It seems innocent on the surface, though. Bandit has to pretend to be pregnant with Bingo in this papoose, and clearly he doesn't have any idea what the heck he's doing. Yeah, Bandit's definitely got his work cut out for him, but things are just about to get worse. Okay, I get it. The message of the episode is that you gotta do things right or not at all. But then he has to do things a bit too right? Not only did he have to carry the baby, he had to birth her too.
But I don't know how to deliver a baby. I thought you grew up on a farm. We grew sorghum.
This step was probably the red flag for Disney. After all, up until this point, it was all innocent enough, and nothing seemed immediately wrong. It had a lot of funny moments, but then what the heck? This was an episode I now enjoy more than I did the first time, but I'm still not over the delivery step, as funny as it was to see Pat committed to it.
Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside.
Morning, Wendy!
Ah!
It's not graphic at all, but wow, this is a more accurate depiction of baby delivery than in something like Early Baby. Excruciatingly accurate. Fits in with the message, I guess. But I guess it is worth it to see one of the cutest shots of Bingo in the show's history.
This episode of Bluey is called Sticky Gecko.
It's similar to Takeaway from Season 1, in that it's set in the same location and it demonstrates what happens when one of the parents gets impatient. The premise for this one is that Chili's just trying to get the kids out the door so they can play with Judo at the park. But the kids have other plans. They launched a sticky gecko to the ceiling and don't want to leave before Chili catches it when it falls. And boy, does it take a long time to unstick. And during this time, Bluey's getting Granddad's hat and Bingo's putting on roller skates. Oh dear, Chili's in a rush, and yet she has to wait for the stupid gecko to drop so the kids can be satisfied before they go. If that's not a test of patience for Mum, I don't know what is.
The door. It is right here. All we need to do is walk out of it. It's so easy.
It's perfectly understandable that Chili would want these kids out the door quickly because it's not polite to keep others waiting. Just imagine how hectic things get to the point where you start dipping further and further to insanity. But it's also important to remain patient because your kids just as well may have good reason to delay everything. In Bluey's case, it's nerves. It's been a long time since she's seen Judo.
I'm just nervous about seeing Judo.
I hear you. It's been a long time since you've seen her.
Also, wow, turns out by coincidence, Judo's also running late. So yeah, it really is a better idea to be patient and to keep listening to that song until it ends. Just like the kids waiting for Sticky Gecko to drop so Mum can catch it.
Gotcha.
This episode of Bluey is called Mum School.
Before Bluey has to take her bath, she decides to play Mum School. You just gotta love how matter-of-fact she is when introducing her Blue children.
They're my children. I gave birth to them all.
Throughout her time mothering the children, Chili grades her on her methods. Of course, still only being a child, she's really gonna need an example in order to understand the best way to parent.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, I don't have any other ideas.
Thank goodness for Bingo not wanting to clean her teeth so that Bandit can show Bluey the way. From this whole experience, we gather that being a parent is quite hard, especially when you have a kid that wouldn't cooperate. In this case, you might want to think about the reason why that child wouldn't cooperate. The balloon in question here is a green one, which is the only balloon to have a string and is able to flow upwards and will take every opportunity to do so.
I think there's a reason you keep floating off, isn't there? What could it be? Maybe you just like exploring.
When it flies off out of the house, though, will he be alright? Well, I'm positive he will because he's got a good mum. If you fail today, you can always try again tomorrow.
This episode of Bluey is called Slide.
This episode is one of the more simple ones from Season 3, but is also pretty adorable. At the Healer House, Bingo and Leela play on a water slide Bandit bought for them. Man, you just gotta love all the things Bandit does for the kids' enjoyment. Gifts like these are just what the average Australia child would need, especially when it gets hot. But while playing on the water slide, the kids would time and time again notice bugs getting on the slide and they don't want to squish any. So they act as bug inspectors to scoop up the bugs using a stick. If there's any problem I have with Leela, it's only one. It's that we just don't see her enough. I love how she interacts with Bingo. It's a sort of friendship I would totally love to see last for a lifetime. So seeing Leela in a major role here makes for a very fun time. Just think about how lucky these kids would be, as well as how their innocent nature can allow for such beautiful things to be seen. Like this butterfly that was once a caterpillar, and that same caterpillar was crawling on the slide. They were already having trouble getting it off by the time Bandit was giving himself a turn on the slide, but the girls act quickly to make sure the caterpillar is safe, even if it means Bandit gets a bit more pelvic torture.
You have to wait for the bug inspector.
I don't know what that is.
It was that moment of need that allowed for the caterpillar to become a beautiful butterfly because of the innocence of two 5-year-old kids.
That's lucky. This episode of Bluey is called Postman.
Bluey overhears her parents in a disagreement, and as calm as that disagreement may be, in a child's eyes, parents that disagree have their marriage at stake. So Bluey sets up a game of Postman and has Dad write a letter to Mum as a way to make up. But she is also reminded that she needed to play Ground is Lava with Bingo.
We're playing Ground's Lava, remember? Oh yeah. This episode of Bluey is called Postman and Ground's Lava.
So she needs to deliver the letter and do so without touching the floor. Plus, she wants to make sure she does it all without getting into any arguments with Bingo.
I think you should agree with me on everything. I don't agree on that. Well, I do, but I don't. We're squabbling. Oh yeah.
What a genius way to combine two games into one. Navigating through Bingo's game just so Bluey can play hers is just... wow. What a way to spread a message. Agreeing with each other can be quite hard, can't it? But then once you go your separate ways for a bit, it seems like you don't have to worry about disagreeing anymore. But then once you reach a certain point where your task is now impossible by conventional means, you start to realize just how important disagreements really are.
Hey, that squabble felt good. Yeah.
It's even true among married couples. An argument isn't really much to worry about.
This episode of Bluey is called Christmas Swim.
Another Christmas special, and this time it's the penultimate episode of Season 2. It's also a reminder that this show is set in Australia, where the summer and winter months are reversed from the way it works in America. So while December is the winter in America, it's the summer in Australia. The family's spending the holidays at Stripe's house, and they're going for a swim in the pool. Meanwhile, Bluey got a new stuffed toy dog named Bartleby, and as she tries to introduce him to the family, they play a bit too rough with him. Yeah, it's pretty exciting to have a new member of the family, but it can also be pretty dangerous for the new member if you're not careful. It's true what Frisky says about the healers during that video call.
They're a bit crazy.
But not to worry, you can always let your family have a chance to adjust to this newcomer. After all, a new addition to the family is in fact family. It's especially important to remember during the holiday season. Man, we really needed this episode in the holiday special, especially after the roller coaster of emotions known as Baby Race.
This episode of Bluey is called Chest.
You're not even going to believe it when I tell you. Bandit tries to teach his young daughters to play chess. Why is this surprising exactly? I mean, people have learned to play chess from a pretty young age, but considering these kids, it didn't seem like they'd be interested enough in the game to really learn the dynamics. But guess what? Just from watching the episode, my thoughts are absolutely right. They have no clue what Dad is talking about.
So the pawns can move 1 square forward, well, sometimes 2 squares, but only on their first turn. And they take diagonally, see?
But the idea of the episode isn't really to show how to play chess. Preschool just seems a bit early for such a complex game, and the people writing this knew it. So instead, it's a demonstration of understanding when it would be the right time to teach your kids something that involves the use of brain power. Bandit was just a bit ahead of himself teaching a game of chess. Meanwhile, Chili, being horrible at chess, doesn't pay as much mind. Bluey and Bingo have great parents, even if one of them has to be reminded that it's better to put kind-heartedness ahead of intelligence. Maybe a few more years before learning chess would do just fine.
First things first, you're not dead, okay? You're at a pool party. Yay! This episode of Bluey is called Tubby.
Bigger is not always better. That's the lesson to take away from this episode. Bluey and Bingo start off with a small cubby in their living room, but then they expand that cubby, adding more and more rooms, making the living room pretty crowded. It's funny because Chili wanted the room to be bigger, and Bandit wanted a bigger TV. but the girls soon lose track of their stuffed toy Kim Jim within the large cubby because of how many freaking rooms there are in their cubby.
There's too many rooms! Oh, oh, oh! Oh, oh!
While the cubby did eventually get overwhelming for the girls, it's amazing just how creative it is. So many rooms, so many different types of rooms. It's like a mansion in there. It's like a more practical version of the Dreamhouse car from Escape, just not on wheels. It further demonstrates just how adorable the show and the characters really are. Just the engagement of children at play without a care in the world, but also having a further understanding of the world around them clues us in on why we love these little pups. The best things really do come in small packages.
Kim Jim! Oh, Kim Jim, we're so sorry. That's okay. Everyone! This episode of Bluey is called Octopus.
Here we have a Chloe episode. Here she's introduced to a game called Octopus. The idea is that while Bandit kneels over the back of the couch, flailing his arms and babbling, Bluey and Chloe have to sneak past him to grab the treasure and make it back without getting caught. Chloe tries to play the same game with her dad, but one problem. Chloe's dad has no idea how it's all meant to work.
Bluey's dad is more fun than you.
But then after some research on creatures of the sea, they soon come to realize how to make the most fun of the game, and when Bluey comes over to play, she's introduced to some variations. A little research can come a long way. This sort of thing can also apply for inventing games. Sometimes you just need that little bit of encouragement from what we learn about our environment in order to let out our silly side.
How about this rule? No one is allowed to say, no, but octopuses don't do that. How about we can say, yes, this octopus does that.
Yeah, but in octopus, that sounds a bit like this.
Yeah!
It's also the perfect excuse to give us a Chloe episode so we can have a little Disney reference on the house number. But just think about how much more fun your game could be if you incorporated new elements and tried out different rules and variants. There's many ways to play a game, so take a look and see what you can find.
This episode of Bluey is called Dirt.
Season 3 is when Judo's character changes for the nicer. Before, she was bossy and impatient, but now, in this episode, she's become conscious about her long fur. Okay, let me explain. Considering Judo and Wendy are Chow Chows, they have long fur coats that take a long time to wash. The sensible thing to do would be to make sure it doesn't even get dirty to begin with. That makes it pretty hard to play with Bluey and Bingo when they've got a mound of dirt to fiddle around it.
Is there a way to play in the dirt without getting dirty? Well, not sure.
I'm sure this episode made Judo haters turn their heads seeing this character development come into play. It also shows how much Wendy cares about her daughter and wants her to have fun. So in order to lift her spirits, Wendy cuts her fur short, and afterwards Judo offers to have the same treatment.
Can you do me?
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
Okay, let's do it.
I wonder how much the internet got enjoyment from seeing Paul Judo. It's not something you'd see every day. But this is a unique episode you'd see Wendy and Judo in, mostly because they're trying something different with these characters, and it works well enough to be warranted.
This episode of Bluey is called Hammerbar.
Now let's talk about envy. Bandit sees a pizza oven in Pat's backyard, and he takes the family to Hammer Barn so he can get one of his own. While Chili is shopping for gardening decorations and supplies for the pizza oven, Bluey and Bingo pretend to have their own houses in the trolley, complete with gnomes for husbands, and fairy lights for pizza ovens. But Bluey grows more and more jealous when it seems as if Bingo kept getting the better deal, and as she soon finds out, such jealousy is going to destroy something, or someone.
This is what happens when you're unhappy with what you've got. Someone's husband eventually gets it.
It seems as if this episode serves as a double message, one being that you should be happy with what you got, and the other being that nothing lasts forever.
He's taking my husband!
I might meet you in the car.
Those two messages fit perfectly together like peanut butter and jelly. You can't just have everything for free, and whatever you do have isn't going to be there forever. And in the end, well, maybe your pizza is not going to look so great, but there's not really anything wrong with that. It's just got character.
episode of Bluey is called Turtle Boy.
This episode is noteworthy for representing the hearing impaired. At first, we just see Bandit taking Bingo to the park, and she plays with a turtle doll that may have been accidentally left there by its owner. And when it was time to go home, Bingo is told to leave the doll there in case its owner comes back.
His owner might be looking for him.
Okay.
After they leave, a Cavapoo named Dougie and his mom stop by the park, and he also plays the turtle doll until it was time to go home. He too is told to leave the doll for its owner. Well, told is kind of an interesting word. Maybe signal?
Leave him there, honey. His owner might come back for him.
I told you this episode had a deaf character, meaning that for this purpose, Dougie and his mum communicate with each other through Australian Sign Language, or Auslan. This meant animating the hand gestures with accuracy in order to get the authentic experience. Another thing to note is how Bingo and Dougie are never on screen together at the same time. I imagine that's because it would be quite difficult for Bingo to interact with a deaf character, since there's no evidence she or any of the healers know Auslan. Though it's possible they could still find some way to communicate like Bluey and Jean-Luc did in camping. But whether or not you can hear, it's always best to do the done thing and do not take the doll home in case the owner comes looking for it.
This episode of Bluey is called Ice Cream.
Life is unfair as it is, so there's really no need to contribute to it. Bluey and Bingo convince their dad to get them an ice cream cone, but things start to go wrong when they want to have a lick at each other's cones because they fear one might take a bigger lick than the other.
You lick first, I'll lick second. But then you'll just take a bigger lick. I won't, I promise. You will.
Okay, kids, come on, sort it out.
This results in a freaking hilarious sequence where they're spinning in circles trying to lick each other's cones while also walking through many different spots in the South Bank Parklands in Brisbane. It's all accompanied by this rendition of the Tchaikovsky piece, Waltz of the Flowers. But while they're spinning around the area, they don't see their ice creams melting until it's too late.
My ice cream! It's melted! Mine too!
Throughout the episode, Bluey's talking about how something isn't fair just for her father to be like, yeah, it is. Look, man, just be honest. Life has never been fair, but it's no good to just mope about it. You do something dumb, and you learn from it, even if you never wanted to learn.
I don't want a volleyball line lesson. I just want an ice cream.
That's what Bluey comes to realize after both wasting the ice cream and then Dad gives his ice cream to the kids. It's at this moment when the kids find the best way to share. Though to be honest, it's a bit easier here because it's just one bowl of ice cream as opposed to two separate cones. But I guess that's not the point. Before, they each wanted to take an equal lick. Now they realize that shouldn't matter as long as they are able to share.
This episode of Bluey is called Family Meeting.
Have you ever wanted a Bluey episode to take place in court? Well, this episode isn't quite it, but it's as close as we could get. Here, Bandit is held on family trial after Bluey accuses him of fluffing in her face. What the heck does it mean to fluff in someone's face? Well, maybe a little clip will help you out.
And Dad got out of bed, turned, and fluffied right in my face.
Well, I've heard enough.
Basically, an excuse to have an episode centered around the idea of someone spreading the gracious gift of flatulence. It's a funny idea for a family dilemma. Everyone knows that dads are known for having gas about as bad as their jokes. The idea here is that you should tell the truth. It's also great how neither Bluey nor Bandit are exactly innocent by the end anyway. Bluey was there in the bedroom because she was playing on the tablet. Bandit's gas was just a happy accident that set up these reveals. The only flaw to note is how Chili referred to Bluey as the defendant even though she's supposed to be the plaintiff.
I sentence you to 1 hour playing horsey ride with the defendant and her sister.
But thankfully, it's only one time, and the word plaintiff is never used anyway. Disney could have just asked to make that correction for their international release instead of temporarily keeping it off their streaming service until they were essentially bullied into putting it there unedited. Cowards.
This episode of Bluey is called Chicken Rap.
Sometimes, an episode isn't shared with us in a linear timeline from beginning to end. This is one such example. It's time for bed, but Bingo's lost her stuffed bunny named Floppy. So the family retrace her steps around the house to find the lost toy, and as we go, we learn about what took place throughout the whole day. The style of storytelling that was used here took influence from the Christopher Nolan film Memento, where a man with short-term memory loss attempts to solve the murder of his wife. In that film, we see a sequence of events starting at the beginning of the timeline going forward, and then another sequence of events starting at the end of the timeline playing in reverse order. Eventually, the two sequences meet in the middle in order to complete the narrative. In Chicken Rat, though, it's the opposite. We start in the middle of the story, and as we're watching everything moving forward, we're also watching the events of the past playing in reverse order. In this way, we start to gather more about what kind of game they were playing that resulted in the misplacement of the toy, and also what the Chicken Rat of the title is meant to be.
What's a chicken rat?
It's a cross between a chicken and a rat.
Man, if only Bandit didn't eat all that sauerkraut.
That's sauerkraut.
Whether he burped or sneezed to give himself away, it doesn't really affect the episode much, except for the fact that in one version he was eating something he was allergic to, which doesn't make any sense, but whatever. It's a unique episode, and for that reason, it's one of my favorite Season 1 episodes.
Can I push play?
Yeah, go on.
This story is called Bumpy and the Wise Old Wolfhound.
This episode is very unique. First, we see Bingo sick in the hospital, and the family sends a video to Mum's tablet. That video is a story about a girl named Barnacus, played by Bluey, who, after wishing upon a star, gets a puppy which she calls Bumpy, played by Socks. Barnacus was very happy until one day Bumpy got sick, and Barnacus is advised to see the wise old Wolfhound, played by Aunt Trixie, for help. The wise old Wolfhound says she can cure Bumpy if Barnacus can bring back a pair of purple underwear from someone who's never been sick. So that's what the purple underwear is for. It sure has a home video-like quality to it, doesn't it?
Why don't you try the Wise Old Wolfhound, Bluey?
Barnacus.
Barnacus?
We can edit that bit out, right?
This episode draws influence from the story of Kisa Gatami, one of the more famous stories in Buddhism. After her only child dies, Kisa visits the Buddhist, who says he will revive the child if brought white mustard seeds from a family that has never mourned a loss. After finding no such family, she comes to accept that every family has had someone die. Same deal with this episode of Bluey. Barnacus was unable to find someone who hasn't been sick who can lend their purple underwear. Even Barnacus herself had been sick at least once. She soon realizes that being sick is a normal part of life, and after some time passes, Bumpy was no longer sick. So if a child you care about is feeling sick, have a nurse at that hospital show this episode and wish them to get well soon.
This episode of Bluey is called Typewriter.
Calypso tells the story of an old dog that sat atop a trunk begging for treats, until he is one day told that he should open it up, and he finds a bunch of treats inside. But this leaves Bluey wondering, why didn't he open the box sooner so he can eat all the treats? So she decides she wants to write that alternate ending, but the typewriter isn't where she left it. Now she's off to see Calypso, the wonderful Calypso of Australia, to find the typewriter. But much like the Wizard of Oz, she's not alone in her need for problem solving. She's accompanied by Snickers, who's having trouble sitting due to his length, and Winton, who's upset that everyone keeps running from personal space! The only thing in their way is the terriers with their imaginary bows and arrows.
Hey, we're shooting bows and arrows at you. Not real ones. They're pretend, Will.
It's by the end of the episode where the story of the old dog and the trunk starts to make a bit more sense, even if it admittedly took me a while to figure out. It did seem a bit strange that Calypso didn't just give Bluey the typewriter, even though she had it with her, but it actually plays into the story of the dog and the treat box, as well as the perils the friends went through to get this far. They used what they had to an advantage despite not recognizing this advantage at first. Bluey with her imagination, Snickers with his length, and Winton with his habit of getting too close to others. The old dog didn't look in the trunk immediately because he didn't think there'd be anything of value inside, much like how Snickers saw his body, and Bluey felt like she can't be an author without a typewriter, but then she realizes her imagination itself is its very own typewriter. There's no story like the mind.
This episode of Bluey is called Wagon Ride.
This is a very easygoing episode where Bandit takes the kids on a wagon ride to the park. but at any moment, Bandit would stop to talk to a fellow adult, which comes as a test of Bluey's patience, a test that her father must help her pass.
You have to take us straight to the monkey bath. No stopping.
Interesting plan.
Wait, no!
At first, it's as simple as a more polite indicator that she wants to keep going, but now, when she watches Bingo playing with her doll, she realizes that she doesn't need to be so bored during the trip.
I know how you can get Jasmine to a party on time. Come with me. Okay.
I like it when there's episodes about appreciating the surrounding sides no matter what the situation is. This one in particular is about how to keep yourself occupied while you're waiting for the ride to get moving again. Certainly a demonstration of just how beautiful this world is once you take your idle time to occupy yourself with your surroundings. As cute as it is seeing Bingo doing as Bluey does, looking up to her big sister for guidance or influence, it's also nice to see things go the opposite way. No matter how old or young kids are, they can always teach us something.
This episode of Bluey is called The Weekend.
The Bluey pilot from 2017, funny enough, was the basis for this episode, though the first episode to be produced for the official series was Yoga Ball, and in producing order, The Weekend was 18. It's very similar to the 2017 pilot. Obviously, the overall design of the backdrops and the character models had to be modified, though because of its source, the animation looks pretty stiff compared to the rest of the show. But new scenes were even animated, including a ding-dong ditch, so the episode can run for 7 minutes like the others. But the overall story is basically the same. While Dad plays with the girls, Bingo finds a walking leaf, and we get to see the show's first 3D shot of a character, but we only see her from the nose up.
Where are you going, walking leaf? Come here, Daddy! Quickly!
But anyway, she was unable to get Dad's attention before the leaf bug flies away. This episode also demonstrates just how amazing of a parent Bandit really is. Most parents wouldn't give much notice to such things, but when Bingo tells Bandit about how he didn't come see the walking leaf, he actually kneels down and apologizes to her, telling her about how he was dealing with a statue sales dog that scammed him with a magic statue. You can expect this to last for the rest of the series, Bandit just being awesome as a parent.
This episode of Bluey is called The Dap.
Have you ever thought anything about Bandit getting so much credit for being a great dad? Well, how about Bandit giving such credit to himself for the entertainment of his kids by pretending to know everything in the world? And that's just what he does during the car ride to the dump. Pretty much the whole time the kids are asking him questions, and he even gives answers, as well as this wacky imaginary scenario where Bluey actually drives the car and the police give chase. Though unlike Escape, which would come out later, we're only really hearing all this and not seeing it.
Who's driving all those other cars?
Butlers.
Butlers?
But let's focus on what's really important. The fact that Bandit is actually dumping a lot of Bluey's old drawings, much to her shock.
That's a picture of me. You're throwing away Bluey. Ah.
Bluey's pained whimper is so real that I felt the same pain. I'm feeling sad for a freaking cartoon dog. But when watching a show like this, that's something you're gonna have to expect to happen plenty of times. So, okay, it sucks at first that our old drawings are getting thrown out, but actually, even though Bandit doesn't really know everything in the world, he is able to give us a lesson on recycling.
Any drawings you throw in this dump get mushed up and turned into new paper.
I guess the lesson here is for Bandit, in that he should be a bit more careful when goofing around with the kids, for instance, pretending to know everything and just claiming to be the best. Yet another reminder that these parents were never truly perfect.
Woo! I'm back, baby!
This episode of Bluey is called Explorers.
Our focus is on two parties of explorers. One party consists of Rusty, Jack, Bluey, and Coco as they journey across the sea back home to Australia. But as they go, the party shrinks as the kids get picked up from school, and Jack is the only one left to continue the journey.
No more supplies. And I've got no idea if we're heading in the right direction. And the deck could use a good scrub.
The other party consists of Jack's father and little sister as they try to make their way to the school to pick up Jack. All they have is a family car and a dead phone, meaning no sat-nav to guide them. Therefore, they need to rely on other folk in order to make it to their destination.
I'm looking for my son's school.
You don't know the way to your son's school?
Teachers with sat-nav running.
Blue.
Both parties, after much struggle, soon manage to succeed because they have remained persistent. The theme of this episode is to never give up on your objective. In fact, it's clearly a theme the animators took to heart when working on this episode. This is one of the few episodes to use cel-shaded CGI, which is used for the family car. It's a good thing CGI isn't used often in this show because if they get carried away with it, the results might mostly turn out less than stellar, and that's not what happened here. The CGI in this episode looks amazing. It's also great to see another Jack episode and to see a bit of the Australian nature. Just all around wonderful.
Is this Australia?
Yeah, mate. This is Australia.
This episode of Bluey is called Mini Bluey.
This is considered one of the lower ranking episodes of Season 3, mainly for how the situation is handled by the parents. At the beginning, they wonder why their two children are so drastically different from each other.
How can you two come from the same parents, be raised in the same house, but be completely different?
Don't know.
So, using hair chalk, Bluey and Bingo take turns pretending to be each other for the parents to experiment. First, Double Bluey. Turns out to be loud, disruptive, pretty cheeky.
If I see a bum, I give it a little bum-diddy-bum. Hey!
Get out of it!
Then there's Double Bingo, much more quiet, more organized, and overall seems to be the ideal situation to find yourself in.
Double bingo! I could definitely get used to this.
What?
Oh, was that too harsh?
Chill the beans.
Well, okay, Bingo's actually a freaking monster, who knew? I guess the way people see it is that even though Bandit never makes any specifications when asking why his two kids are different in the beginning, other lines seem to point to the parents really preferring Bingo over Bluey before the experiments even started.
Bluey, can you be as quiet as Bingo for a bit?
What about Bingo?
Bingo puts hers in a neat pile when she's read them.
But of course, the parents do learn their lesson by the end, understanding that it's perfectly normal to have multiple children be different from each other. I have a feeling people would probably be more forgiving to this episode if it was earlier in the run, like Season 1 maybe, but this is a Season 3 episode. You'd expect the parents, who have often been ranked among the best cartoon parents in recent years, to know better by now.
But seriously, how good's Double Bingo?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that is kind of a weakness with this episode, but these parents had never really truly been perfect from the outset, making them more realistic, and the humor makes up for it, especially in the last minute. It's also a great excuse to see Double Bluey or Double Bingo. How about swapping the palette altogether? I mean, come on!
Eh,
Close enough.
This episode of Bluey is called Copycat.
There's not a lot of preschool shows daring enough to tackle the subject of death. Here comes Bluey to pick up the slack. And it didn't seem like it would take this route at first, especially as early as Season 1. Most of the beginning was just Bluey copying her father's every move throughout the morning, but then they find an injured budgie lying on the ground near the sidewalk. They take the budgie to the vet, but they were unable to save it in time.
It's bad news, I'm afraid. The little budgie died.
Later that afternoon, Bluey gets the idea to reenact the events with Bingo in order to cope with the loss, but the end result turns out to be the opposite of what she was expecting.
Bingo, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be better.
Up until that point, the reenactment seemed to be spot on. You'd think now that we got the whole budgie situation to deal with, Bluey would no longer be copying Bandit, but that wasn't really the case. Just watch the real-life example along with the reenactment back to back.
It's green, mate. Get off your phone.
It's green, mate. Put your phone call away.
But anyway, for the concept of death in a preschool show, it's demonstrated here that it really is a better idea to have it just be a dumb beast that dies as opposed to an intelligent life form. Yeah, it still hits hard, but it's really the best way to handle it. I don't really expect preschool shows to deal with it at all, but what can I really do about it? It's out of my hands. Bandit's finding his kids to be a bit too noisy, so to keep them quiet, he disguises his request as a game. But this starts to become a challenge when he has to bring the kids to the mall in order to pick out a moonlight unicorn for Muffin's birthday.
Oh, biscuits.
But the challenging part is not just that the kids are unable to talk because of their game, but they can't get one Muffin already has or else she'll throw a big tantrum. So the children have to rely on pantomime in order to clue in Bandit what to buy, but he is terrible at charades, so he has to rely on a teenage employee to help figure it out.
Look, Alfie, you'll understand one day. Can you help me?
Yes, I can help you.
Alfie is one of my favorite guest characters from the show, having been voiced by Australian personality Robert Irwin. The character was the first and so far only character featured in the show to be a wild dog. This one's a dingo, a lineage found in Australia. But anyway, it's also adorable how committed these kids are to the Quiet game that even when Bandit tries to put it on pause, they're still silent. Even when Bandit tells them the truth, they're still only communicating through pantomime.
Look, the Quiet game isn't actually a real game. I made it up because you kids were too noisy.
They're invested. With any kid, there's a time to be quiet and a time to not be quiet. Your dirty tricks to get yourself peace and quiet could very well backfire on you, and you realize just how lovely it is to hear their voices.
This episode of Bluey is called The Creek.
The beauty of the great outdoors can be explored deeply in this episode. The kids find themselves bored of how limited everything in the playground feels, so Mackenzie suggests they go to the creek, and Bandit agrees to take them there. Though Bluey's not keen on the idea at first, she trudges on, battling through a bit of things called nature.
The trouble with her is the noise.
Leeches that just want to eat your blood, a slippery steep slope, oh, and some slippery stepping stones. But as she goes on, she starts to further appreciate the beauty of the creek and overcome her fears.
The creek is beautiful! I did it!
Yeah, you made it, Squirt!
Yeah, I did.
It really goes to show that sometimes, in order to see the beauty of something, you'll have to battle through its not so pleasant elements. But once you're past all that, it's easy going from there. There's lots to see in the world you wouldn't want to miss. Watching Bluey's adventures through the creek could be something to help inspire your child to have that kind of experience with you. Because the creek really is beautiful.
The creek is beautiful. This episode of Bluey is called Shadowlands.
This episode centers on Bluey, Snickers, and Coco at the park, playing a game of Shadowlands. The idea is to stay in the shadows as you make your way to the goal, in this case the picnic basket, because anything not in the shadows is crocodile-infested sea. But throughout the game, Coco makes suggestions to alter the rules whenever one of them ends up stuck, but Bluey's not having it.
You can't change the rules, Coco! Aw, why not? Because they're the rules!
But then it comes to a head when they find themselves stuck in the shadow of a palm tree with no way to the basket.
The little critters must be hungry.
But fate changes for the better when the wind pushes a cloud to block the sun, allowing them to reach the basket safely. This is a great way to introduce Coco and Snickers to the show, with Coco portrayed as an impatient kid, while Snickers, being a sausage dog, isn't quite as active as the others. It makes sense that the first message for Coco would be that it's more fun to follow the rules. Though if we're going on a technical level, when playing What's the Time, Mrs. Wolf, she was playing by the rules, just giving herself an unfair advantage. That's the real lesson of the day, don't do something just to get an advantage, especially if it isn't fair to the game.
This episode of Bluey, unfortunately, is called Unicorns.
This puppet, in my opinion, is one of the best things to come out of Season 3. In Unicorns' first appearance, Bluey doesn't want to go to sleep, so Mum reads her a bedtime story about a queen who lives in a kingdom where everyone's barefoot. Gee, doesn't that sound like modern society? But while she's reading, Dad breaks out the loud, obnoxious, self-centered puppet named Unicorns.
I ain't going nowhere, Tut. I feel so good at dance. Make shoes. Guilty. What should I get?
Unicorns, what's your favorite food?
Children.
Oh.
I'm not sure what unicorse is supposed to mean. It sounds like a cross of a unicorn and a horse, which would just be a unicorn. But close to the end, Bluey and her mum come to realize that there's no way to really change unicorse, much like how mum can't change Bluey's insistence on staying up.
Good on you for trying, but you can't change unicorse.
Ugh, I think you're right.
I'm not sure you can change anyone very much.
That's the message here. As much as you may want to change others, you just can't. Setting aside the whole unicorse ordeal, I think the funny thing about this story is how the queen stepped on a prickle, which this kingdom's full of, and by the end of the story, she is advised to make shoes for her loyal subjects. You'd think with a tale like that, the dogs of today would adapt to this, but hardly anyone wears footwear at all. Only when it's convenient for plot do they ever wear anything on their feet. Isn't this neglect for footwear the reason this happened in Sticky Gecko? Ow! Put some freaking shoes on, lady. That crap is lethal. But alas, everyone's walking barefoot even to this day. Way to ignore something else completely over a super loud puppet that just won't leave you alone. There's something about that which is just hilarious to me.
This episode of Bluey is called Neighbours.
One of the more easygoing episodes. The family sets up a neighborhood in the playroom using couch cushions and other things. The scenarios run as follows. Bluey visits Chili on occasion for a book club, Bingo has a ton of animals and not enough room for all of them within her own residence, and Bandit's the noisy neighbor that annoys the crap out of Chili. You know, the ups and downs of a typical suburban neighborhood. The least you could do in situations like these is to politely ask your neighbors to fix the problems they cause. And if they say no,
please fix it.
Just glare at them until they cave in. That'll do the trick.
Okay. I guess I can fix it now.
Thank you, neighbor.
This episode is where we see Bandit at his most unhinged. I'm not talking about just going insane or anything, just the things he does that annoys Chili. The hot rod car that is too loud, dog, well, Bandit himself is barking too much.
Will you please keep it down?
Playing the drums, and then, dang Australian chainsaw massacre committed on an innocent tree.
Chainsawing!
All he wanted was a friend. Of course, that old tradition. So, here's a solution. Bingo needed to clear out some animals in order to please Bluey after they take up her reading area. So, they're taken to live with Bandit.
I love your new pets, neighbor!
Shush! Baby Buckles likes it quiet!
That's all the companionship he needed, and all it took to make it this way was some politeness, accompanied by a stare down.
This episode of Bluey is called Seesaw.
One thing I love about the parents in Bluey is that they don't have the most conventional methods of parenting, but what they do have is typically effective. This is one such example where the parenting isn't obvious at first glance. At the beginning, we see Bluey, Bingo, and Pom Pom playing a game of laundry where it falls off the line and the wind blows it around. But Pom Pom, being a small Pomeranian, finds it hard to play with the healer kids. So when Bluey and Bingo play on the seesaw, Bandit, seeing how lonely Pom Pom must feel, decides to let his weight take up one end of the seesaw, rendering the other end useless. The only thing that can lift Bandit off the ground is if Bluey and Bingo gather enough of their friends so they can outweigh the big blue meanie.
I'm sorry. It's not your fault, Coco. It's his.
I gotta say, my gosh, that must have taken a lot of planning ahead, knowing exactly which kids are around at the park and how much they weigh all together in order for this plan to work. If you don't see the genius, then allow me to explain. With Bandit's weight taking up one end of the seesaw, the kids eventually settled on using their friends as extra weight on the other end. But they don't consider Pom Pom because of her small stature. Not until they try every other kid in the park, and together, they're still not heavy enough. Maybe that one extra kid will make all the difference, and in the end, she does! The lesson the girls learned from this experience is that even the smallest of kids can leave a big impact.
This episode of Bluey is called The Decider.
Pat and his kids watch the rugby game with the healers in support of the Maroon team, while his wife Janelle watches at the Labrador's home supporting the Blue.
We're gonna flog ya!
Boo!
Dad, don't boo, Mum.
This puts their youngest child Chucky in a dilemma. Anytime a team scores, the supporters for that team celebrate and it upsets the opponent. and the two opposing sides are his own parents. He's not sure which team to pick.
He has to choose one side. Why? Because you can't keep changing.
He can if he wants to, Lucky.
But that's not fair.
You do whatever you want, sweetheart.
That's okay. I can choose one colour.
Fans have speculated that this episode could very well be an allegory for divorce. If so, then I'm thankful that's all it is, an allegory. Pat and Janelle are still married. This story is just a representation of a child's struggle to pick between two parents that have split up. It's like he has to pick one side or the other for his custody. But there's one little issue I must bring up. It's not often divorced couples come back together. At the next rugby match, all the Labradors and Heelers are supporting the same team. I'm not sure how that could be explained. But however you interpret the episode, in the end, it's all about picking sides. It's up to you to decide what it really means to you. An open-ended interpretation is what Joe Brum intended for this episode, so go nuts.
Come on! This episode of Bluey is called Smoochy Kiss.
I'm not exactly one for gross-out humor, but if you get a kick out of disgusting activity, this is your go-to episode. In fact, it's even entertaining to me in this particular episode. When Mum talks about some of Dad's bad habits, the kids try to keep the two separate, but that doesn't turn out to be a good idea as they start to learn more and more just how disgusting their father really is.
Ew! Your armpit is leaking. Ew, so is this one.
Looks like gravy.
Ew!
Yep, gravy.
Why are you hopping?
Peed on my foot. Hang on, one more.
Bluey, what is it? Dad hit a floppy!
Oh, he sure did.
That's not stopping Mum from trying to get a smoochy kiss from Dad, though.
I just want a smoochy kiss.
It's no use trying to deny it. All of us have had disgusting habits, and some of them just stay with us even as we grow older. But the disgusting activity is just the type of example used for the overall message. For anything or anyone at all, it doesn't have to be disgusting. It's just that there is always some kind of flaw with that person or thing.
Yeah, your mum's no bunch of roses either. You ever smelled a breath in the morning?
No.
And that's before I've had my sardines.
Ew!
But just the same, there's always the good, and that's what you live for. It's something to get used to, and it's for the best that you do. Hey, ever notice that the kids never got disgusted by watching their parents kiss, which in itself is rare, until the end of this very episode?
This episode of Bluey is called The Sleepover.
Muffin stops by the house for a sleepover. Under these specific circumstances, the kids would have been allowed to stay up later than usual, but whoa! What the heck is going on here? Muffin's acting crazier than normal if that was even possible.
I am a llama eating a banana. Yum, 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 yum. Did she say she's a llama?
It's like her parents must have accidentally slipped something in her sippy cup. Nah, it's just the fact that she skipped her daytime nap, meaning they can't stay up late now. Took a bit of negotiating, but Mum agrees the kids can play one more game before bed, which the kids try to extend the playtime so they can stay up late.
Yes, just warning you, I think we'll take a long time deciding.
No, you won't.
Okay, as much as I was joking about the whole sippy cup thing earlier, it's watching this episode that made me see how a toddler skipping her sleep makes it seem like she's drunk. All the signs are there, spouting random gibberish, causing destruction to property, and slurring in her speech.
My name is Boo Boo Bubble. You stop doors, door stop. I'm the flamingo queen. Coconuts have water in them. Next up, the museum. I
If you thought Muffin's chaotic nature was hilarious like I do, this is the perfect episode to watch if you want your Muffin fix. But it's also a great way to recognize why you shouldn't neglect your duty to a toddler that needs to get her rest as soon as possible. This stuff, it's quite serious. Look at all that damage.
This episode of Bluey is called Bad Mood.
Yeah, just a funny little bingo episode here. It starts when Mum catches her trying to sneak a biscuit, and just a few little words started Bingo's bad mood.
You're being a bit of a cheeky kid today.
I'm not a cheeky kid. I'm in a bad mood.
Bingo goes to her father and the bad mood starts causing damage to the place. I just love how nonchalant the whole family is about these kinds of wild games they get involved in. Then again, the healers themselves have always been wild. So Bluey now has the objective of getting Bingo out of her bad mood. I don't know why, but it always seems like Bingo gives me a few episodes that I can personally relate to. Like with Favorite Thing, how I tend to stay in a negative mood. This episode, however, exemplifies it. A playful representation of a negative mood that's basically letting everyone else know, hey, I'm ticked, while also sticking very close to this negative mood. And it's over something so simple as being told that you're acting cheeky, which is different from describing the overall personality. That kind of thing can happen, but I guess in some ways it can be healthy to let out the frustration so you don't have to bottle your emotions. Of course, it depends on how you let it out, but that's not the point of this episode. The point is, moral character isn't judged simply by actions, which is a great lesson for Bingo.
No way, he's bad. No, he isn't. He was just behaving bad.
This episode of Bluey is called Ragdoll.
Bluey finds a $10 note that her father must have dropped, so she and Bingo want to go out for ice cream. But there's one little hurdle they must face first: Dad succumbing to ragdoll physics.
Ragdoll!
Oh no, not Ragdoll!
They'll only be able to get their precious ice cream if they can move Ragdoll Dad all the way from the TV room, downstairs, and in the car. Yeah, that'll mean plenty of fun as Dad gets pulled around, tumbles downstairs, overall takes a beating as the kids try to get him from point A to point B. And of course, because of how heavy Dad is, it really gives the kids a lesson on hard work.
A bit of hard work never hurt anyone. Oh, okay, that actually did hurt.
One interesting thing to note is how Wendy suddenly starts playing a part in the story just as the kids help Dad make it out of the porch. And she actually becomes important because even if the kids did get him to the car on their own, there's still the matter of lifting Dad into the driver's seat and then actually driving to the shop while Dad's still in ragdoll mode. And these are only little kids, so thank goodness Wendy stopped by with her immense strength to lift a grown Blue healer in the driver's seat of a car.
Promise me you'll work hard to maintain a strong core, girls. Don't get lazy.
Yes, Wendy, we won't.
That was just another demonstration of what rewards you may reap from your hard work. Why do you think this show is so beloved?
Whoa, this is the best ice cream I've ever tasted.
Ha! I told you!
This episode of Bluey is called Exercise.
This is an episode I further appreciate the more I watch it and think about it. On the surface, it's quite simple. While Dad's doing exercise, Bluey and Bingo play out a workstation, with Dad's exercise regimes being convenient for their game. But this basic premise is pretty much all it is nowadays. That's because when the episode first aired, there was a scene at the beginning where Bandit weighs himself and is disappointed, thus the reason he even starts exercising. Sometime after the episode aired, the opening scene was cut from the episode, following some controversy that accused it of fat shaming, which is kinda ridiculous. Of course, we're only shown 7 minutes of the healers' lives at a time, but out of all possible minutes to remove from the experience, why did it have to be that one that caused enough of an uproar? But it's not just that. During the opening scene, it was Bluey that ultimately convinces her father to do exercise. Then later in the episode, Bluey refers back to this point when trying to sneak Bingo off to the amusement park. It's then revealed at the end of the episode that Bluey was playing the boss the whole time, wanting Bingo to be happy due to how boring the real job is. Without the opening scene, all of this just comes out of nowhere. I mean, it is fun watching Bandit playing with the kids while getting the exercise he needs at the same time, but as the episode stands now, I wouldn't have even considered talking about this episode. But in its original version, I can rank this episode comfortably high.
This episode of Bluey is called Granny-mobile.
This episode is often seen as a redemption episode for Muffin. Doreen has a garage sale set up so she can make enough money to go on vacation. Unfortunately, Doreen turns out to be a terrible sales dog, mainly for the fact that she's a pushover when it comes to setting the prices.
How much do you want for this?
Oh, well, what do you think?
$2?
Okay, that's fine. Thanks.
Meanwhile, Bluey, Bingo, and Muffin are mucking about with this old scooter that Doreen plans to sell, but the dial turns up when a real grouchy old lady makes a visit. She tries to buy the scooter for its listed price of $300, but Muffin demands more from this fat-shaming granny.
$900! You need to lay off the biscuits.
What? You said I was looking good.
That's odd. Exercise was under fire for a fat-shaming scene, but this episode wasn't? But man, you just gotta love how much of a method actor Muffin is. We first caught a glimpse of this when she was playing charades, or at least trying to. What makes this a Muffin redemption episode is the fact that Muffin becomes more aware of her grouchiness in her portrayal as the grouchy granny.
Grouchy granny is a bit too grouchy. Are you sure there isn't another type of granny?
It's also pretty genius just seeing how high Muffin was willing to raise the price of the scooter, basically so Doreen could see that she needs to get her act together and demand high but reasonable prices in order to get what she wants.
200 final offer.
1,000!
What? You're dreaming. 500.
11!
Outrageous.
She may not want to cause a fuss, but sometimes you just gotta.
50.
Ha! Doreen!
That's my girl.
This episode of Bluey is called Facey Talk.
Some people think of Muffin as an annoying brat that sets a bad example for kids. Okay, she's not the most well-behaved kid, but this episode in particular is more about how hard it can be to deal with, especially when both parents have different regulations. In the Skype call with the cousins, the kids draw silly things on their respective family tablets, but when Muffin hogs the tablet and refuses to give Socks a turn, Uncle Stripe puts Muffin on timeout. But then Muffin steals her father's phone and uses that for her facey talk silliness and tries to escape her father. Only after the wild chase does she realize why it's never a good idea to hog. What I love about this episode, aside from the amazing CGI used for Stripe's house, is just how easy it is to compare the two families.
Can I have a turn doing the drawing yet, Bluey? Yes, but can I just finish this? Cool.
That's the good example to take from this, showing that Bluey and Bingo have brilliant parents with agreeable standards. Muffin and Socks, however, don't. As a result, Muffin immediately calls Socks a hogger even though she only leaned in to say hi. She doesn't respond nicely when suggested to take turns, and once put on timeout, she steals her father's phone and runs amok, and at one point we see she still has Bluey's ukulele, claiming she's still playing with it even though it's tucked under the bed, clearly not being used. Stripe, being the laid-back father he is, doesn't read into the situation enough before setting his discipline, and Trixie, apparently without telling her husband, had done away with timeouts for a while.
We don't do timeout anymore.
What? Since when?
I read a blog.
You didn't tell me.
Because you're never here.
This is why parents shouldn't have such conflicting standards. It confuses the kids. But it's nice to see the parents make up, and Muffin does accept her timeout when Stripe's phone gets dropped into the pool. The lesson here is not just one for the kids, or just one for the parents. It's for everyone. No hogging.
Finish. Oh wow, that's great, Socks. Thanks, everyone. This episode of Bluey is called Magic.
I feel like this is one of the more underrated episodes of the show. The premise is that Bingo wants to play with Mum, but she doesn't feel like playing. So Bluey teaches her to use magic, though of course making it very clear that it's all pretend. That's very important.
Oh, Bingo, pretend my hand controls your tail. Oh, okay. I can make it go this way. Wow! And this way. And wow!
Then they go try it out on their dad and Lucky's dad. But when Mum catches them up to their mischief, she tries to teach Bingo that magic should only be used for good. But Bluey would rather use it for cheekiness.
It should be up to us how we use our magic. If we want to be cheeky, then we can be cheeky.
So if the magic isn't real, how is it the adults are able to act along with the magic even when they aren't looking at the kids? That doesn't matter. When you really get down to this episode, it's displaying a battle between good and evil, and in a hilariously clever way. Bluey starts getting carried away with her magic while Mum tries to fight back and keep Bingo away from the dark side of the magic. This isn't really an episode that's meant to be taken seriously. It's a cheeky little episode, so why not be in a cheeky mood?
This episode of Bluey is called Bike.
Bluey's trying to ride a bike for the first time, but she gets more and more frustrated as she keeps failing. When she decides to give up, she notices other kids having similar frustrations with other things, like Bingo trying to drink water from the drinking fountain. Not easy with her stubby legs.
Oh, poor Bingo.
Then there's Muffin trying to wear a backpack. Yeah, spin around a bit, Muffin, that'll help. Then there's this kid, Bentley, whom we hardly see after this episode aside from a few cameos in Bingo's kindergarten class. She's trying to use the monkey bars.
Yay! Jumping! Oh! Why can't I do it straight away? Why won't you go off my back, you bag? I'll never be able to drink water again.
You are sure to struggle at first when it comes to trying something out for the first time. All you really need is a bit of perseverance and determination. But I also see it as the kids realizing they can find their own way to accomplish what they've been setting out to do. Basically, to cheat the system and do what you set out to do by unconventional means.
That's less than ideal, but it's still a win.
It's by watching these kids finally succeed that Bluey finally gets the courage to give her bike another chance. Yeah, this is just what we need. Just a relaxing episode filled with childlike innocence.
This episode of Bluey is called Space.
This one's centered on the voyage of Rusty, Jack, and Mackenzie as they play out an adventure through the stars to travel to Mars. But at the beginning, they had the alternative option to go to a black hole. Throughout the journey, Mackenzie, for some reason, wanted to play out a situation where he was abandoned by his squad mates.
I want to pretend that you leave me behind, and I'm all alone.
Why?
I don't know.
When he redirects his course to the black hole and decides to go in, we start to understand what that reason is. He had an experience when he was younger and felt abandoned for real life, even though he only got turned around for a little bit.
My mum left me behind.
She didn't. You just got mixed up in the slide. She's just over there.
Mackenzie!
Hey, Mum.
See? There she is.
The black hole is representative of his traumatic memory, and it's a memory he wants to relive because he wants to cope with this trauma. It's a normal coping mechanism for kids, as demonstrated in Copycat, but he had already been reassured in that moment that he was never really abandoned, so he doesn't really need to keep returning to this memory. Even if neither Rusty or Jack understood Mackenzie's troubles, they knew they couldn't make it to Mars without their chief scientist, so it's nice to see a happy, though emotional, resolution.
This episode of Bluey is called Whale Watching.
Okay, now that is quite a realistic situation we got in the kids show. The parents have been partying hard on New Year's Eve and now they're really exhausted.
Are you sick?
No, just,
Sleepy.
yeah, sleepy.
Well, that's what they say, but we know what really happened. They're hungover. This makes it kind of hard for the kids to fully enjoy their game of whale watching, but they try their best under the circumstances.
Wake.
The old girl's not very lively today.
But Mum manages to get her commitment after putting on a whale documentary narrated by Padme Amidala herself, Natalie Portman.
They stay with them all the way back to the colder waters.
It reminds her that even when hungover, she still has a duty to her kids. I mean, really think about it. It would seem a bit double standardy for Chili to tell Bandit to play along for the kids, but in the end, never commit to the game herself.
And point of fact, the boat doesn't decide about rough seas, the boat driver does.
They may not always have the energy, but once given the reminder, these parents will do what they can to keep the kids entertained. This episode is probably the best demonstration of this. Just think how satisfying it is after all that trouble, going through rough seas, snapping turtles, tidal waves, and while the whale isn't very lively at first, just a little push made it all worthwhile.
This episode of Bluey is called The Show.
Now we're getting deep into it here. Though subtle, it's one of the more hard-hitting episodes for parents that have gone through tough times. This episode is set on Mother's Day, and Bingo very quickly needed comfort when she thinks she ruined Mother's Day after dropping Mum's breakfast tray. Bluey suggests the idea of the two kids putting on a show for the parents, based on their mother's life from when she first met Dad up until her first pregnancy. But the show is interrupted when Bingo's blue balloon, meant to represent a pregnant belly, pops, and the upset starts all over again.
I knew I ruined the show. It wasn't your fault. It was.
On the surface, it may seem at first that Bandit holding Chili's hand after the balloon popped was just a brace for a potential outburst, but fans speculated that this reaction hinted to a miscarriage Chili had, which was confirmed by Joe Brum himself in a quote written in a book called Hard to Bear, Investigating the Science and Silence of Miscarriage. It was cool of him to make a response like this. Of course, neither of the kids would have any way of knowing about that. Bingo is more concerned about how the show went.
I have a little cry. Check. Then I pick myself up. Check. Dust myself off. Check. And keep going. The show must go on.
Thanks to her mother's advice at the beginning of the episode, she was able to finish the show by giving Bandit a bit of embarrassment. Man, these parents will go through a lot just to make their kids happy, don't they?
Daddy, me go boom boom in nappy.
And good thing too, or else they wouldn't even be parents.
I don't know what that says. I can't read.
It's called puppets. Unicorns for turds! Children rejoice and embrace your annoying as sin entertainment! On the surface, it seems to have a very simple message about having good manners and taking care of your personal hygiene, neither of which Unicorn seems to take at heart.
You don't brush your teeth, you don't eat vegetables, and you don't take showers. Grub.
But when he gets the hots for Chili, he learns that he's gonna need to clean himself up in order to have a chance with her. So yeah, he does just that. It seems like the night will be going quite smooth, but then he screws it up, big time.
Oh my gosh!
Wait, no! Come back!
Next, after learning he's a puppet, he starts having an existential crisis, much like the first Toy Story film when Buzz realizes he's really a toy. That's when things start to get more interesting. While it does teach us why it's important to have good manners, it also gives us a sort of perspective on the people who make this show. At the end of the episode, we're given a very interesting message as Unicorns changes hands.
Hey!
What's going on? Whoa, this feels weird.
Whoa, this is amazing!
You know what's good about being no one?
What?
You're everyone.
What we see on screen may just be rigs that slide to give the illusion of life, but the characters in this popular Australian cartoon make so many people happy. They're a part of us, and it doesn't seem like they'll be leaving our heads for a while. And since they're rigs, that means whenever they dream, the animators can give them some very interesting dreams.
Wow, that was a weird dream.
This episode of Bluey is called Double Babysitter.
Mom and Dad are going out for the night, so they accidentally call in 2 sitters for the kids. Bandit called his older brother Rad, and Chili called Bluey's godmother Frisky. These are sitters that the kids are very unfamiliar with compared to their parents, so they organize some games to get to know them better. It's especially hard for Bluey because she doesn't want anything to be different from the way her parents do it, but she starts having more and more fun with the new activities the sitters introduced. Even better, throughout the night, Rad and Frisky develop a romantic relationship. This is just a brilliant way not just to introduce 2 new characters, but an equally amazing way to get them together. I'm sure a lot of women would find themselves relating to Frisky here. There's no getting around it. You've had your own prior relationship that ended up not working out.
Bosco's her true love.
Not anymore.
But true love is forever.
Well,
But the core of the story can really be best summarized in the story Rad and Frisky tell for the kids. The prince, played by Rad, defeats the dragon and rescues a princess, played by Frisky, but she doesn't want to go with him. But for the sake of the kids, they get married at the end. Bluey just had a bad experience the last time she had a babysitter, and that was why she was so hesitant.
Mum can't hear very well, so she turned it up loud.
She was watching something scary.
That's why you don't like babysitter put-downs, isn't it?
Yes.
Maybe your kid has had something similar happen in the past, but hopefully this episode will encourage them to give new babysitters a chance.
This episode of Bluey is called Granddad.
There's something you just don't want to do, huh? To that we say, too bad. It's not all up to you to decide. Here, we're introduced to Chili's father, who had just got heart surgery. He's supposed to be resting, but he'd rather not rest, so the kids join in on his fun with Chili in hot pursuit. And as a recurring theme, Bluey is advised to eat her pumpkin seed so she can be big and strong, but she doesn't want to. Unfortunately, it's necessary in order to effectively paddle a canoe.
This is why you have to rest.
Well, this is why you have to be big and strong.
But eventually, Granddad finally decides that he should rest his body so he can recover. It's especially important to take care of yourself for the ones that love you. Even as an adult with children of her own to raise, an old man's daughter may still need him in her life.
I'm his daughter. He should take care of himself for me because I still need him.
But in spite of the heart surgery he went through, it's amazing how Granddad is still resistant to the idea of rest, and for how long.
Well, it should be up to me. They're my thumbs.
Even while the thrill of the chase is there, in the end, you should realize that Chili was right to be so concerned. And isn't it just heartwarming to see them sitting side by side just like they used to way back?
That was a long time ago.
No, it was yesterday.
This episode of Bluey is called Tradies.
Two tradespeople, or should I say trades dogs, stop by the house to install a fish pond in the backyard. This fish pond was actually first referred to in the episode Stumpfest.
Oh yeah, that's true. I want to put it in a fish pond.
They say they'll have the fish pond done in 3 days, so Chili expects them to be done in 3 days. During this time, the kids spy on the tradies and learn more about their personal lives. They think the tradies are their enemies, but the tradies themselves already have enemies they're trying to make amends with, the boss with his wife and the apprentice with his girlfriend. In the case of the kids, they never really had anything to fear from the get-go, they just needed to get to know the tradies better in order to feel secure. In the case of the tradies, they do know their enemies, but they're not trying to be enemies. It's amazing what a bond the healers form with the tradies as the kids listen in more on what the tradies themselves go through. The boss is forbidden by his wife to eat a pie, so the healers make one for him. And by the end of the episode, we also see the apprentice having fixed his relationship with his girlfriend. It's also just beautiful seeing the fish pond all finished.
It's amazing!
Though oddly enough, in episodes to follow, we don't see the fish pond. It's just further proof that the show doesn't really follow a direct chronological timeline. Not that it matters.
This episode of Bluey is called Road Trip.
Before you ask, no, we're not there yet. It's a family road trip. The healers want to get to their camping site as quick as possible so they can get the best spot. But in order to do this, Bandit wants to stay ahead of the gray nomads or old dogs and RVs because if they get ahead, it'll slow them down.
If we get stuck behind them, we'll be the last to the campsite and we'll have to camp next to the toilet block.
Ew!
Throughout the trip, however, Bluey feels bored because even though Chili is certain she brought the tablets to keep the kids entertained, they're nowhere to be found in the car, so she'll have to try other methods.
You don't need computers to play jumping games. Just use your fingers. Whoop, whoop.
But even after the tablets were found at last, Bluey and Bingo decide instead not to use technology and stick to their imagination. This is the perfect reminder that kids don't need technology to stay occupied in a long trip. All they need is something to look at beyond the enclosure that is a moving car. Just take a look around as you go forward, find something you never thought to find before. There's always a fun way for your kids to be entertained if they're looking around outside for something fun to turn into a game for them. I'm not just talking stuff like Cars the Rainbow, I mean like think of what the kids are doing in this episode. Train race, jumping cows, you know, there's always something.
This episode of Bluey is called Relax.
The healers are on holiday, staying at a resort, and Chili wants to get down to the beach as quick as possible so she can relax. But her kids are too fascinated by all the fancy things in their room to get ready for the beach. Though hesitant at first, she's advised to go down to the beach alone while the others stick back to catch up later. But it's at that point she realizes she's going about this all wrong.
I don't know how to relax.
Aw, come here.
I mean, sure, the kids were goofing off, but they're just finding their methods of relaxation. Chili just needed to find hers. Children can actually be a bigger influence on adults than you give them credit for. This is demonstrated very prominently in this episode. If you need to unwind, your kids may have already demonstrated ways to do so. Just show a goofy smile in front of the mirror. Or, if you're still not sure how to relax, watch your silly kids in the present.
You kids just go about it, don't you?
It's like a two-way road with this show. The kids can learn from the adults, and the adults can learn from the kids. It's a fair trade. The title of this episode lays true to how one would feel watching a show like this. Don't think too hard on it. Just relax.
This episode of Bluey is called Housework.
Ugh, cleaning up. Not something you want to do, just something that needs to be done. It's definitely not fun for the parents. Look at their faces. It looks like they've lost their souls working on this. But when the kids, while tidying up their blanket fort, are observed to never walk normally as they go, the parents take a break from their tedium to try and make sense of it. But one particular motion gives their minds a little click and they try to mimic it. When the kids notice, they teach the parents how to do the beep walk.
Can you show us how you do the beep walk?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's silly, and they put the responsibility of housework on hold just to learn it, but once they decide to get back to it, they find that the housework doesn't have to be tedious. The great thing about this show is that kids can be just as much an influence to adults as it goes the other way. You kinda need that silly mindset in order to really appreciate it. Who better to have that silly mindset than Bandit and Chili? Not only are they meant for each other, they're also meant for fun and games. They can even learn from their kids how to make such a boring task as cleaning the house something fun. It's like Mary Poppins, but much more down to earth.
This episode of Bluey is called Sheepdog.
Things can get pretty chaotic at the healer house, even for a healer. In order to step away from it for a while, Chili needs 20 minutes to herself, meaning Bandit needs to keep the kids occupied. And yes, he has a mullet. So the kids decide to make him pretend to be a sheep, which is pretty much just torture for him. But the harder task is making sure the kids stay away from Mom while she's got her alone time. He's even pretending to be a sheep while this energy insurance guy stops by the door.
Hi, how would you like to save $200 a year on your energy bill?
Meh.
Excuse me?
Now that's one way to keep insurance salespeople away. But for real, anybody who has children or pets can pretty easily relate to this episode. It's hard to keep everything under control, and that's why every now and then you gotta have a break from it. Bluey has a hard time understanding it first, but it becomes a lot more clear to her once Wendy enters the picture.
I think she wishes she didn't have children.
That is not true, my love. Why don't you kids go upstairs and play with Judo? I'll look after your sheep for you.
I'm not sure how many would expect the message to get across to children the way it's meant to, but it worked on Bluey, so I bet there's a chance it'll work on the kids watching. So if your mother needs 20 minutes, it's just because of some hard work. There's nothing personal about a little break.
Sometimes mums just need 20 minutes.
I don't understand.
You will one day, sweetheart.
This episode of Bluey is called Curry Quest.
I can imagine this episode being played in school to teach students of any age the steps of a hero's journey. While Chili explains these steps to Bluey while she learns to crochet, Bandit and Bingo take on their old quest over to the Border Collie's home for a curry swap. The steps include how the journey starts and the perils ahead.
Oh, there's a magpie protecting his nest. He swooped me earlier. Look!
Ooh. But I can't walk backwards, remember?
Come on!
After the heroes arrive at their destination, some new information is gathered to reveal the true challenge of the quest.
Your dad just told my dad he has to fly to work and he's gonna be gone for ages.
But in facing this challenge with the knowledge the heroes have gained along the way, the quest can be completed. A very simple way to describe the hero's journey, but an effective one. The scope may not be grand like Lord of the Rings, but this is Bluey we're talking about. This is a show that could take even the most simple of concepts and apply a whole new layer to it. The base setting is for a curry swap, but there's so much more to it than that. Any quest has some kind of danger to it and all sorts of potential risks. A hero doesn't usually want to take on a quest at first, but the act of doing so is what makes them heroes. And that, my friends, is how a young child ought to learn of the hero's journey.
This episode of Bluey is called Omelette.
Bandit's the birthday dad, and he's expecting a good breakfast, so Chili decides to make an omelet. Bingo volunteers to help, but the process is anything but smooth.
Oh my goodness! Sorry, Bluey!
Also, Bandit gets very cranky if he waits too long for his breakfast. Poor Bingo just wants to be helpful no matter how many things go wrong.
No, you can't guard the queen. Why not? You're not good at it.
Even when she did make an omelet, Chili decides that Bingo deserves her chance, so they make a new one from scratch using eggs that were kindly handed to them by their neighbors. I love these types of episodes that blend emotional support with a great sense of humor. Okay, that's what most of these episodes are like. This one is about why it could be a good idea for parents to allow their kids to help out with your activities.
The number you have dialed has been disconnected.
Not only does it allow them to feel important, but they can also learn the correct steps in the process. While it is funny to watch Bingo break the eggs, mostly by slamming them too hard to the silver bowl, it's just so satisfying watching her make the omelet correctly once given the chance at last. Sure, a few eggshells got in there, but hey, what could go wrong?
Give it here! No.
Stand back, Bingo. You might lose a finger.
This episode of Bluey is called Piggyback.
While on holiday, the healers take a walk along the riverside. Well, more specifically, the kids are on scooters. But during the walk, Bingo keeps complaining that her feet are getting tired, and Dad promises to give her a piggyback ride if she absolutely cannot go further. But each time she complains, something comes up that motivates her to keep going.
Bin chicken!
Yeah!
That's what this episode's all about. You may think you can't go further, but once you find something fun, you find that you can move ahead. Being a 4-year-old means there's things about how your body works that you don't quite realize at first. Naturally, there's more to understand when you enter adolescence, but Bluey's not the right show to learn about that. No, just the simple function of how your feet carry you.
I've noticed that. Your legs don't get as tired when you're having fun.
Bingo goes further when she's having fun than when she's just walking. A walk doesn't have to just be a walk. It can be something more exciting than that. Make believe. Find something fascinating to keep you moving forward. Besides, it's good exercise.
This episode of Bluey is called Daddy Put Down.
The penultimate episode of Season 1 was by no means a disappointment. At the time this episode was put on the air, the Christmas special wouldn't be seen for months, so we needed some kind of emotional experience to hold us over for the time being. Mom needs to leave the house to attend a baby shower, so Dad has the job of putting the kids to bed for the night. Dad tries everything he can to make the Daddy Put Down fun for the kids, but Bluey would time and time again feel sad that Mom's not here.
I miss Mom.
Way to bring the emotional damage where it hurts the most. You'd especially feel bad for Bluey in this episode. You can tell just how much she loves her mom and enjoys her company.
Will I already be asleep when you get back?
Yes, but I'll still come in and give you a kiss goodnight.
But I won't feel it.
But she does soon cope with this by setting up a pretend baby shower of her own and even reenacted the moment the mother tells her little kid she's got to go to a baby shower.
No, Mama, no go. Be sad. Oh, don't worry, sweetheart.
Much like how she reenacted prior events in Copycat. See, that's the beauty of the show. Sometimes the kids had to recognize the message of the episode for themselves, and this is only one of many demonstrations of this.
This episode of Blue is called Calypso.
This appropriately titled episode introduces us to the kind-hearted schoolteacher Calypso, voiced by Australian singer Meg Washington.
Sister Rain has left, and Father Sun is home. Brother Wind comes blowing in to welcome home the gnome.
I praise Calypso as being one of the best characters in the show outside the Healer family. She has a soft, sweet voice, has the best advice, and is always there for her students when they're in need of comfort. You could consider her a character with no flaws, but that's only because we never see her interact with the adults. We're constantly seeing her through the eyes of the kids, and for all they know, she does have no flaws, and this episode is simply a way to introduce her. Out of all episodes in Season 1, Joe Brum considers this his favorite, and while I do have episodes higher up, I can see why that is. We need a sort of soft, calming break after all the chaos we've seen in previous episodes, with multiple things going on at once. Bluey runs a fish and chip shop that only has chips at the moment. Indy takes a job there so she and her child can have a place to live. Honey builds a village for a gnome. The terriers lie and wait for defense duty to call. And this Chihuahua Pretzel is kind of a loafer at the moment. This lasts until the end of the episode, when he uses a stick as a fishing rod. Hey, isn't there a fish and chip shop that needs fish?
This episode of Bluey is called Handstand.
This episode is a direct sequel to Duck Cake, airing the day immediately after. Unlike the last episode though, this one's a more artistic experience. The basic premise is that Bingo's just trying to do a handstand, not only that, she's trying to get someone to notice. But since the episode is set on Bingo's birthday, the adults are far too focused on getting everything ready for the party, and meanwhile, the kids are too busy playing with each other to keep the focus going.
Did you see me? Oh no, sorry Bingo, I was doing the dominoes.
On the other end of everything, Nana wants to be helpful in setting up the party, but they're certain they have everything covered and don't want Nana to wear herself out too much.
Oh, I don't think Nana's are very good at relaxing.
The artistic part of this whole thing is that for both of these scenarios, there are shots where the camera is situated in the same spot at the same angle for about a couple minutes at a time. In these shots, there's plenty of other things going on at the same time, yet you can still maintain focus on whatever it is that needs to be focused on. Don't worry, Bingo, I saw your handstand, and Nana, if you want to be helpful, I'm welcome. Eventually, they both find their peace when Nana sees Bingo do her handstand, and she does it some more for her viewing pleasure. But then when the cake is brought out and Chili calls for Bingo, the two are so fixated on what they're doing that they don't even notice. How funny!
This episode of Bluey is called Muffin Cone.
Bluey's introduced us to a bunch of crazy dogs, but imagine if one of them had to wear an Elizabethan collar. Here, Trixie puts a cone on Muffin in an attempt to get her to stop sucking her thumb. That couldn't have happened at a worse time, because she was supposed to be playing with Bluey and Bingo that day. Because of the cone, Muffin finds it hard to correctly identify the ingredients while running a sandwich shop.
Here's the ham. Pull it. Now I'll cut it into triangles. Where's the knife?
But she wants the cone off so she can suck her thumb again.
Muffin!
But Muffin's not the only one with a bad habit to break. Trixie's trying to lay off the junk food, but when Chili lays out a bowl of chips, she just couldn't resist.
Trix! It might be time to take off Muffin's cone.
Even the parents have habit problems. It's not just the kids. But either way, a habit's not going to go away that easy. Even with something like a cone of shame to stop it in its tracks. Eventually though, the kids turn the cone inward and they figure out a way so that they can have the most fun with Muffin while she has the cone. She can bloom as a pretty flower, she can dance as a ballerina, she can act as a traffic cone, and she can even be a wedding bride.
We're getting married. We're getting married. We're getting married.
That's cute and all, but at the end of the day, your kid will break her habit at her own pace, not when you tell her. She'll just use that habit she had broken so she can have that kind of fun again.
Hey!
Cone of shame! This episode of Bluey is called Promises.
The best kind of promise is not so much an MI6 agent, but more a bond of trust. With the healers, this bond doesn't start off too promising. Bluey gets upset that Bandit didn't keep his promise to take the kids to the library, though in his defense, the library was closed because the kids spent too long at the trampoline park. Regardless, who is she to talk about breaking promises when she herself broke a promise to clean up a panda puzzle?
Did Bluey break her promise?
Well, you broke your promise, so I can break mine. What?
To resolve the matter, the family declares that any time they make a promise, they have to keep it. But Bluey and Bandit abuse the crap out of this rule. Bandit has to play toddlers with the kids, and Bluey has to carry 2 heavy books that her father checked out. Okay, you shouldn't break your promise, and you definitely shouldn't use promises to trick others. The purpose of making promises is to build trust, and trust is the only thing that keeps the world turning. If the trust is betrayed, everything stands to fall. It's when she witnesses Chili promise to catch Bingo when she jumps down from the playground dome that she realizes just how important promises really are.
You promise?
I do. I promise.
It's just super satisfying to watch the family uphold their end of the deal, especially towards the end. That last line is just a brilliant way to cap off the episode.
I promise I'll always love you.
This episode of Bluey is called Easter.
Season 2 ended on not 1, but 2 holiday specials. The previous episode was for Christmas, and the season finale is on Easter. The premise is that the kids are worried the Easter Bunny will forget to bring them candy like he did last year. But on Easter morning, they find a series of clues that lead them around the house to find the Easter candy.
What's your favorite color? Blue, like you.
Yeah, a very simple episode, but one that shows creativity and just how great of a team Bluey and Bingo really are. That sounds like a fun idea for a kid's Easter experience. Don't just leave the Easter candy in their Easter baskets, instead make it into a game. Put their minds to the test and see if they can solve the mysteries around the house in order to locate the eggs. Sometimes they'll have to take influence from a man who holds the same profession as their father and see the clues from higher up. Oh, and they may have to go to the bathroom while the father's using it in order to find the next clue.
I can't do it.
Even if they don't find the eggs, at least they have each other and the talents and qualities they admire.
We're not forgettable. Yeah, we're rememberable. Happy Easter, Bluey. Happy Easter, Bingo.
But suddenly, in that embrace, they just might find the clue that leads them to their goal. What a whirlwind, but that's just kids for you.
This episode of Bluey is called Show and Tell.
It's pretty obvious that this episode takes place after the episode Tina, where the kids weren't sure at first why their parents tell them to do certain things. Only after some long-winded hijinks do they find out, but they seem to have forgotten all about that experience.
Your invisible friend Tina beat me up, and we all learned that when I tell you to do something, I'm trying to help you.
I didn't learn that. Me neither.
It's nice to see a children's show use the same moral for multiple episodes because, realistically, kids aren't going to keep the same moral in mind the whole time, so it's good to remind them every now and then. Before you ask though, no, this isn't just a rehash of the Tina episode. This one stands out because of a different display of the message. Bingo's going to show a crab-clawed candy for show and tell, but isn't quite sure how to do it without turning off her peers.
It's called show and tell, Bingo.
I'm good at the showing bit, but not good at the telling bit.
Meanwhile, Bandit's dealing with the opposite problem. When trying to teach the kids why doing what you're told is important, he's doing way more telling than showing.
What you're calling bossing around, I call blah blah blah, cleaning toilets, blah 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 blah, solitary confinement.
Too much telling. Kids switch off if you talk too long.
That is until he sets a destination on sat-nav and deliberately ignores the instructions so the kids can see the results.
Statues work! Is your surfboard here?
No, I think we're lost.
We told you!
I can only assume this episode's trying to teach us to set a balance between the two, while also giving kids a lesson on why doing what you're told is important, much like Tina, but in a more visual way. So once again, it's like a double whammy, with two messages together in an important balance. A balance as important as showing and telling. This is the only episode so far to have a different intro. It starts out normal at first, until all of a sudden, whoa! This game of musical statues is won by Bingo instead of Bluey. Not only does the Bingo title appear in the intro, but it's the title card too, so we see the name of the episode twice.
This episode of Bingo is called Bingo.
It's aptly named because this one is all about bingo, since Bluey's off to play at Chloe's house. So while Chili's fixing the toilet, Bingo's gotta find a game she can play by herself. However, she's struggling to do so.
Why are you hiding? I'm playing hide and seek.
Right. Who's coming to find you?
Oh.
What she really needed was a problem to solve, much like how Chili needed to fix the toilet. But when Bandit comes home after dropping off Bluey, it's revealed that Bluey wanted to know the color of a kiwi bird, so Bingo breaks out the world map puzzle to answer the query, but it turns out she's missing a piece. Yeah, the puzzle piece is stuck to her bub, but don't tell her that. She's gotta have her fun drawing missing posters for the puzzle piece and posting them around the house. If you really need your Bingo fix, this is one of many episodes featuring her that you ought to watch. The amount of cuteness that's spread in this one episode has already broken the dial just by how she's the main character here. The idea of a spin-off looks like it's in the air just by how the intro's changed, but she already appears as the main character in most of these episodes, so we don't really need a spin-off. The show's not just about Bluey, it's about the Healer family, and they're taking turns as the main star.
Kiwis are brown! Hooray! It works! Hooray!
Thanks, Mom.
This episode of Bluey is called The Beach!
While the premise is simple, the impact didn't disappoint for this first half of Season 1. The Healers go on a trip to the beach, and on this trip, Chili decides to take a walk along the shore by herself. Meanwhile, Bluey finds a shell and wants to show it to her mother, so she gets her legs and follows her mother's footprints in an effort to catch up. It's funny how distinct paw prints are left in the sand, even though the bottom of their feet never have that kind of detail. During the journey, she encounters a few obstacles, but her bravery must shine through if she hopes to reach her goal. It's upon mustering that bravery, Bluey finds that much like her mum, she likes walking by herself. Neither of them know why, that's just how it is. But the reason doesn't really matter. Wherever you're going, there are so many sights to admire. This includes beach nature. Yeah, I'm calling it beach nature because it's the kind of wildlife you'd find at the beach. All it takes is a bit of bravery in order to sidestep past a pelican that stands in your path. What a beautiful episode, and it didn't hold back in making the first half of Season 1 worthwhile.
This episode of Bluey is called Army.
Sometimes episodes don't need to revolve around the Healers. Here's an example. We're introduced to a new character named Jack, who's the show's representative for those with ADD, or even ADHD, its hyperactive cousin. It's never explicitly stated out loud, but the symptoms are there.
Jack can't sit still or remember anything.
When he's admitted as a new student at Calypso's school, he's introduced to Rusty, who recruits him for patrol in his own pretend army.
Yeah, you can play.
The two quickly bond, and we also learn that Rusty's father is actually in the military.
How do you know so much about the army?
Because what adds to the army?
Gee, as if ADD wasn't enough to think about for a kid's show. But this was a great way to bring a new character to the show. Even more amazing that it gives Rusty a best mate to share a great experience with. The message of the episode is actually perfect for Jack, telling us that even with some hindrances, there's still many things you're capable of. In Jack's case, he can run fast, being a Jack Russell Terrier. Another thing to note is how Jack's symptoms don't act up as bad while he's playing with Rusty.
Well, you're really good at playing army.
And it's great to see Rusty taking Jack under his wing the way he did. And I'm sure you're probably the most happy to see Rusty's father coming back from patrol, even if we only see him from behind in this particular episode.
This episode of Bluey is called Fairy Tale.
Back in the 80s, people had crazy haircuts, you listened to music on cassette tapes, and the colors you saw were aplenty. During that time, also, Bandit was about 10 years old, on holiday with his kid brother Stripe and teenage brother Rad. These are Bandit's experiences as a kid in a fairy tale about a mean brother who suffered a curse until he changed his ways and was cured by a princess. As a kid, Bandit used to tease Stripe a lot, until one day, Rad jinxes him, meaning he's unable to say a word until someone says his name. Stripe uses this as a psychological advantage to get back at his big blue meanie brother.
Banditums? Ha! Band dishwasher? Ha!
I have a connection with this episode because the 1980s is among my all-time favorite decades. It's just great watching a story taking place during that time period in a Bluey episode. But anyway, it's also cool seeing how Bandit used to be as a kid and how his parents treated him.
How do I jinx it so none of you can talk?
Who ate all the mini cereals?
He did!
Right, Blue, get over here.
Even more interesting is that even after Bandit helps his brother out of a field of prickles, he still doesn't free him from the curse.
Thanks, Bandina. Haha. What?
Pronouncing his name right would help, baby. But remember, this story has a princess, and that princess is a red healer that reads his name off the hat he threw to save his brother. Bandit remembers this to be Chilly, but she has no recollection of this. After all, they weren't even in London, and Bandit didn't have a finger up his nose.
Oh look, it's just like when we first met.
To this day, we're still not entirely certain which scenario is true. I'll let you decide. Do you believe in fairy tales?
Here you go. Thanks. See you later. Yeah. See you later. This episode of Bluey is called Perfect.
The Season 3 premiere aired on September 5th, 2021, because that's the first Sunday of September. In Australia, that's Father's Day. But how come the show didn't air on the second Sunday of May for Australian Mother's Day? Oh, whatever. The premise is that Bluey wants to make the perfect card for Father's Day. She doesn't want to see any flaws in her work of art. She takes influences from the many different games she and her father play together, but each time she always spots something that's off.
It's supposed to be a picture of Dad and me.
Bluey, it's fine. It doesn't have to be perfect.
There's no real way to achieve perfection in your work. All you can do is put the best effort you have. It's just like how the parents in this show are. No matter how much praise these parents get, they never were truly perfect.
Oh! Hi, Bluey!
Many episodes have already given a clear demonstration of this, but this episode serves as a perfect reminder.
It's done!
These parents aren't perfect, and that's why we love them so much. Your parents aren't perfect, so you don't have to be perfect. As long as you're showing your love, that's as perfect as anything is gonna get.
This episode of Bluey is called Squash.
It's a competition between old and young. Bandit and his little brother Stripe duke it out in a game of squash. Well, to be more accurate, they pretend to be remote controlled by Bluey and Bingo respectively using their racket cases. It's funny how they're able to accurately follow the movements even if for the most part they're facing away from the kids. The lesson of the day is that the older siblings is not always going to come out on top, which is something Bluey soon realizes after Bandit wins the first round and Bingo takes it pretty hard. But Bandit's just asking to be humbled.
That's not how grown-ups work, kid.
But it's how kids work.
Then kids are silly.
What? How very dare you?
There are a couple ways to go about interpreting this episode. On one hand, it can be seen as an underdog story. Stripe was unable to beat his prideful older brother at first, but then he gains the confidence he needed in order to win.
There, I fixed you.
Yeah, Bingo. You did.
On the other hand, Bluey said she would make Bandit lose on purpose after he said kids are silly. Losing confidence from that, plus Bandit's surprise when he saw Stripe performing better than he did the last round, was what resulted in him losing this round. But whichever way you want to go about this, you got a fun, humor-filled episode. The more competitive type isn't always going to win, and don't call your kids silly. Otherwise, they'll strike first, strike hard, and have no mercy.
This episode of Bluey is called Pass the Parcel.
Lucky's dad has been majorly involved in a few of the games the healers get themselves into, so why not get him majorly involved for an entire episode? Here, he's shocked to learn that the way Pass the Parcel is played nowadays is different from how he used to play it. It used to just be one big prize in the middle of all the layers, but now, every time a kid unravels a layer, they find a prize inside.
I'm putting my foot down, Janelle. We're raising a nation of squibs.
When Pat tries to introduce the way he played Pass the Parcel in the 80s, everything starts falling apart as more kids are disappointed. But it's not all bad. One by one, the kids who won the big prize decided for their birthday party they'd play Pass the Parcel by Lucky's dad's rules.
Jasper has asked that we play Pass the Parcel by Lucky's dad's rules.
They're not my rules.
It shows a sort of progression of tolerance for losing a game that kids tend to go through, though people online tend to debate which set of rules would work better for kids in playing Pass the Parcel. Personally, I think Pat was onto something when he introduced the way he played the game, because we can't have our kids grow up to be squibs. They gotta understand the feeling of losing and come to terms with it.
I'm sorry you didn't win Pass the Parcel, Bingo.
It's okay, I don't mind.
Really?
Yeah, when Lila is happy, I'm happy.
This is something that every kid will have to understand, so Lucky's dad introducing this version of Pass the Parcel is a blessing, even if it didn't start out that way at first. It's a lot more fun to be in suspense, not knowing who's gonna get the big prize and when they'll get it.
Birdie car! Everyone! This episode of Bluey is called TV Shop.
After picking up the kids from school, Dad's gotta stop by the pharmacy to pick up some vitamins. He's gotta keep that energy up if he's gonna raise his kids after all.
Is it because of us you feel like an old man?
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
It's all good. You also make me feel like a young man.
The minute they step inside, Bluey and Bingo are fascinated by the surveillance monitors mounted on the ceiling, so they just stick around the entrance to watch the monitor, and they soon find that Winton and his dad are at the same shop, and so are the terriers and their mum. Coco's there too, because as established at the beginning of the episode, she was sick and had to miss school for the day.
I hope she's okay. Maybe she has bum worms.
So as Bluey gives instructions through the monitor, Bingo tries to navigate the shop in order to find Coco. This is another creative episode, and it shows that kids will use just about anything new they find fascinating to do what they need to do. It's also another way to show that Bluey balances out his episodes between the humorous ones and the emotional ones. This one is more about the humor, though it can also be quite touching towards the end. It's like a confirmation of how the kids make their father feel both young and old at the same time. Old because he's got kids to raise, and young because those same kids spark that period of innocence once more. It's all done in a way that could only work in a show that's set in the modern period, but still feels so timeless.
This episode of Blue is called The Adventure.
This is so far the only episode to be mostly displayed in a more cinematic aspect ratio. The idea there is to tell its story like a cinematic fantasy adventure film, though really it's kids at play imagining their own fantasy setting.
Hooray! Honey Horse can't talk, remember? He just names. Oh yeah.
Bluey and Chloe play out the story of a princess that must leave the comfort of her castle in order to find food for the starving kingdom. But during her journey, she finds out that an evil witch is turning everyone and everything to stone. Though afraid, the princess vows to stop the evil witch and save her kingdom. The premise is simple, the setup is simple, but the imagination of the kids run wild, not just with how everything runs, but also when it comes to Bluey and Chloe swapping roles around throughout the episode. Different roles include the princess, the horse, the witch, and the fairy grandmother. The only other characters we see actually interacting with Bluey and Chloe are the terriers with their armpit farts. Now come on, that was something we used to do in our childhood, there's no use denying it. But wow, this is another demonstration of just how creative the show's writers can really be.
This episode of Bluey is called Duck Cake.
For Bingo's birthday party, the family needs to have a cake made for her. But not just any cake, Bingo specifically wants a duck cake, which is pretty hard to make. But while Bandit's making the duck cake, Bluey's got to clean up a city she and Bingo made with blocks in the foyer. But she'd rather help Bandit with the duck cake, even as Bandit comes up with many different ways to motivate her to clean everything up.
But why should I do it?
Because you just should.
But why should I just should?
Because I'll let you lick the beater.
Bluey eventually realizes how important it really is when the head of the duck cake hits the floor.
Oh, duck cake!
Oh, that's not good.
Any show at all can give a message about why it's always good to help others, but this episode in particular not only delivers it on an emotional note, but also in a clever way to fit in with the characters themselves. A happy dog typically wags its tail. That's pretty common knowledge. Let's see if we can apply that same knowledge not just as a common trait, but also to deliver a message. A helpful dog is a happy dog. This is a lesson Bluey understands as she cleans up the mess of the fallen head and subsequently cleans up the entire city.
Thanks, Bluey.
It's also just so adorable once the duck cake was finished and Bingo approves, even if it's not in the best of shape. But it's better to have committed to it than not.
This episode of Blue is called Born Yesterday.
This was originally just an honorable mention in the top 30 video, but after rewatching it, I have a whole new appreciation for just how beautifully it presents itself. It's another one where Bandit does something embarrassing, but just has fun with it. When the kids hear him use the term born yesterday for the first time, they decide to have him take the phrase literally.
Oh man, is it too late to bend over?
So Bandit pretends to be only 1 day old, and not only is he already fully grown, he can also form words and walk on both legs. He just has other concepts to learn about, such as what's alive and what isn't. Food is delicious, he has a wife, the sun is supposed to be in the sky, and most importantly, the vulnerabilities of the male body.
Ah, swing! This is...
A lot of the times we see Bandit doing something embarrassing in public, it doesn't seem like he's having much fun, but he's just doing it out of love for his kids. In this episode though, he just goes for it, complete with a smile on his face the whole time.
Sorry, Lucky's dad. He was born yesterday.
Yeah, I'll say.
But what actually resonated with me more upon second viewing is how the message is delivered. At the beginning, Bluey and Bingo pretended to snap photos of their mother's butt while she was doing yoga.
Why is it rude to take photos of your bottom?
It just is.
But it's just a bottom.
Just trust me, I've been on this planet longer than you.
In teaching Bandit the many wonders of the world, the kids find that such introductions only cause further trouble because the curiosity isn't as strong. So it's really better for him to just take his time, to admire the beauty of what he finds, and discover for himself just how beautiful the world really can be.
This episode of Bluey is called Dragon.
The family gets together with only crayons and paper, but what they draw tells the story of 4 brave warriors on a hunt for a dragon. Each member has a different drawing style based on their ability to draw, making for much bigger creativity than in something like Escape. Surprisingly, Bandit's style has the lowest quality because he sucks at drawing.
I'll give it a go, but I'm not a very good drawer.
On the other hand, Chili's art style looks the closest to the style we see on the show. Like, whoa woman, Chili out! No way you got this good. But when Bluey starts to doubt her own drawing ability, we get flashbacks to when her parents were about her age and got different feedback on their drawings and the results thereafter.
That doesn't look like a car.
That does look like a car. What did that kid think it looked? Oh yeah, it was the 80s. Kids were overly critical.
Who is that?
That's my mum. Your grandma.
It's not as good as the one in the picture.
You're right. It isn't.
What?
But it's pretty good for a 7-year-old.
This is the first, and as far as I'm concerned, only time we see Chili's mother in any form, and it was done in the form of a memory because that memory is all that's left.
Your mum sounds nice. Yeah, she was.
That's the difference between the parents. Chili was encouraged to keep practicing, while Bandit wasn't. Like grandmother, like mother, like daughter. Bluey is encouraged to never give up, and the search for the dragon was a success. Even if Bluey's grandmother was unable to live to see this burst of confidence, we can rest assured that she's smiling in the skies above.
You're not coming, are you?
This episode of Bluey is called Flat Pack.
When I first ranked this episode in my top 30 list, I didn't realize there was actually more to this episode than the kids going through these evolutionary stages based on Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. What we see is Bandit and Chili struggling to build a flat pack, meanwhile chucking away the extra cardboard packaging for the kids to use for their evolutionary game. They start off as fish, then they go to frogs, and lizards, dinosaurs, birds, and up to the cave dogs. They even drew in the cardboard box an image of the parents depicted as deities that have created the earth and its inhabitants.
Yeah, little tackers.
We made them.
I don't know how I missed the religious connection there. I guess it just goes to show how subtle the show really can be. This is about as subtle of an episode as you could get. I was mainly focused on how the kids were engrossed in their game of evolution and how the parents struggle with the flat pack before eventually getting it complete. But the kids were just going through evolution. They were also progressing through the stages of life, Bingo from baby to adult, and Bluey from a middle-aged mother to an elderly woman. And then, after Bingo takes off on her career, Bluey passes through an arch, walking toward the completed flat pack of the Porsche to join her creators as a representation of death, which Bandit only confirms further in the episode's final line.
This is heaven.
This episode of Bluey is called Fruit Bat.
It's time for the kids to go to bed, but they just don't want to. Bluey especially is very fascinated by the fruit bats, learning that they are nocturnal creatures that only sleep during the day.
You mean fruit bats don't need to go to bed now?
No, but you do.
This makes her wish she was a fruit bat so she could stay up all night. It takes a while for the real heart of the episode to get going, but eventually, Bluey is given the idea that she should try to dream about being a fruit bat. From that point on, the rest is history. It's the overall scope of the episode that ranks it so high, not just the animation and the music, but also the feeling of freedom one can embrace by the power of their own dreams. It's the kind of freedom Bandit has when he dreams about playing touch football with his mates. He doesn't get to do that as often anymore because he has a family to raise.
5, 6, yes mate, 7.
Thanks for looking after us.
10. You're welcome.
Same with Bluey and her desire to be a fruit bat. What more needs to be said? If you can't be it, dream it.
Wow. This episode of Bluey is called Bumy.
When I was in second grade, there was this teddy bear our class had that we would take turns spending the weekend with and taking photos of the fun stuff we do together. Bob Bilby is essentially the same idea. It's Bingo's turn to take the class puppet home for the weekend, so let's take the best pictures we can for the album. But there's a problem. The kid's attachment to technology doesn't make for very exciting pictures, does it?
This is the most boring time Bob's had in the whole book.
No, that's not true, kiddo.
Yeah, it is.
So they decide to set all that technology aside to do some more exciting things and take pictures using a camera that runs on film.
Are you ready, Bob?
Ooh.
That seemed to do the trick. It really came off as a big lesson for the kids that if you've got a friend stopping by for a visit, try to spend the kind of quality time that doesn't involve too much technology. They hardly seem to forget that with spending that time with real friends they could talk to and interact with. It just needed to be ingrained in their minds when they had to spend the weekend with a puppet. But that doesn't make it any less appealing. It's still a great message for kids to spend less time on technology and more time with physical, tangible beings.
This episode of Bluey is called Bedroom.
Here, Chili's experiencing that emotional feeling mums get revisiting that old nursery that she used to keep the kids in when they were babies. Seeing no more use for it, she plans on turning that nursery into a spare room, but Bluey suggests that it could be her own room just for herself. Remember the 2017 pilot when Bluey and Bingo used to sleep in 2 separate rooms? Well, Bluey decides she wants to have that be the case now, so her bed is moved into the new room, and the sisters divide their belongings between each other. But the transfer continues even after bedtime.
It's bedtime, kids. Come on. You should have done this earlier.
It's pretty simple why the transfers continue. It's because while content with her decision at first, Bluey quickly grows to miss the old room with Bingo. It starts to become more clear the second time Chili had to remind the girls that they should be asleep at this time. For someone like me, having a new room is a bit discombobulating at first, and it's never something I really volunteer for, but I do grow used to it. For Bluey, it was her decision, but she immediately starts having regrets after bedtime.
I'm just not sure I've got everything I need.
It's not the room, it's who she's not sharing it with. Because of this, for the rest of the show's run, it seems like Bluey and Bingo will never be sleeping in separate rooms again. Just separate beds after this night, like always.
This episode of Bluey is called Stick Bird.
When I first watched this episode, I felt like it was one of the best episodes Season 3 had to offer. I still think it is, but after reading up on it, my thoughts haven't exactly changed, but I got a whole new perspective for it. The stick bird of the title is a bird-shaped mound of sand with a stick to make up the head, which Bingo creates at the beach, but is later destroyed by some other kids. This makes Bingo upset, and she thinks of the kids as bullies, even though that was never their intention in the first place.
They're mean.
I'm sure they weren't trying to be mean.
They're my rivals.
But Bluey teaches Bingo how to take her negative emotions and throw them to the sea. This is actually very relevant because not only is it a great way to display the message of the episode, Bandit's been feeling a bit down himself.
Hey, here look.
Oh, sorry, what?
Nothing.
It's never clear in-universe why he was feeling this way, but I've read on the episode's wiki page that it was a way for Joe Brum to vent his frustrations about whatever negative criticism the show receives. I'm not sure if said criticism is about specific characters or specific episodes or any controversy the show ran into at all. Then again, we don't hear Bandit's answer at all for his sad state, so I guess that ties into it. Some people theorize it may have been work-related, as hinted by a specific line in the episode.
But when you put something beautiful out into the world, it's no longer yours, really.
It's another one of those moments in the show where an element of the episode is open to interpretation. But whatever the reason you ever get frustrated, just take the negativity and throw it far away, never to be disturbed again.
Here I come!
This episode of Bluey is called Rug Island.
Using felt-tip pens to resemble many different objects, Bluey and Bingo set up the fictional Rug Island, which is basically the show's version of Neverland, where children never grow up. When a grown-up named Bandit finds his way there, he's not quite accepted at first.
Let's eat him! Ow! Get off! Don't worry, we're friendly. I'm not. Ow!
But then he starts to adjust to the customs of Rug Island and become a member of their society. Then his true inner child starts to come to the ultimate test when a stray football hits its mark on Rug Island.
Oh, what was that?
But wait, is it a football or a big white chocolate egg? This episode goes out as a reminder to adults that childhood never truly goes away. Who better to remind parents of this than their own seed? It's all in a magical moment of playtime when everything becomes so clear. You had your moment of childhood and now you don't have it because you've passed it on to your children, and the cycle is sure to continue for generations to come. But your kids will always find a way to give a piece of that childhood right back to you.
What did she give you?
Everything.
This episode of Bluey is called Onesies.
Chili's older sister Brandy was first mentioned in Bluey's big play, but makes her first on-screen appearance in this episode. She stops by the house for a visit after 4 years without interaction and gives Bluey and Bingo onesies. However, it seems like Brandy got the sizes mixed up because the zebra was too big for Bingo and the cheetah was too small for Bluey. But once Bingo puts on the cheetah onesie, she starts acting like a wild cheetah and chases the family around the outside. It's also during this experience where we learn something about Brandy that may have contributed to her not speaking to her sister all those years.
Why can't she just have the thing she wants?
Because it's not meant to be.
Even if nothing's explicitly stated, the problem with Brandy is that she cannot have kids. The exact reason isn't stated either, but most people narrow it down to infertility. That would probably make it the heaviest topic this show has ever delved into, more so than death or miscarriage. This makes it another episode that's more for the adults than it is for the kids. That's not to say the kids can't learn something from it either. The message here is that you can't always have the things you want. Bluey really wanted to wear the cheetah onesie, but there was nothing that could be done to make it fit. But the zebra fits her, so what she has is useful in evading Bingo's attacks.
Well, zebras are pretty good dodgers.
You can argue that the same can apply to Chili and Brandy when they distract Bingo with that dance they did for their mother on her birthday. The infertility issue with Brandy is a hard-hitting enough topic this episode presents us with, but it's a kind of solace to know that even if Brandy can't have kids, she can at least entertain those of her sister.
This episode of Bluey is called The Pool.
Stripe and his family have gone on holiday, so he gives his brother's family permission to use his pool while they're gone. How perfect, because it's a hot freaking day in Australia right now. However, when taking the kids to the pool, Dad neglects to make sure they bring important things like sunscreen and thongs. Hey, you Brits can tell it's alternate English, you bunch of plunkers. If us Yanks can handle it, you can handle it. Anyway, because they didn't bring the important stuff, it becomes pretty hard for them to enjoy their time at the pool. It's also hard for Bingo to keep clear of the creepy pool cleaner. But cue Mum with all the things they need so their time at the pool can be enjoyed at the fullest. You ever want to have fun, but you gotta do something boring first?
But I don't want to clean my teeth, it's boring.
Yeah, even the boring things are important because they can contribute to the fun being had in the first place. Like the sunscreen. Out of concern for the kids' safety, Dad doesn't want them swimming in the sunny bit because they don't have sunscreen on.
Oh, hey kiddo, sorry, not into the sunny bit. You've got no sunscreen on.
But the shady bit gets so minuscule that they can't even swim at all. All is saved, however, once Mum brings the important stuff. Basically, don't be so neglectful or else your special moments won't be quite so special.
This episode of Bluey is called Cricket.
This episode was ranked at number 1 on Blueyfest, and I can see why people love this episode. It's on a much more personal level compared to many other episodes. Even if I know next to nothing about cricket, that didn't matter. What mattered was the passion the characters had for this sport.
But cricket's just about hitting a ball around the grass.
Cricket's about more than that, kid.
Here, at a birthday party, whose it is doesn't matter, the adults are just trying to get Rusty out. Reason being, he's a dang pro at cricket. He practices all the time, whether at home, at Jack's house, or even playing a game with his brother's friends. It gave him a lot of experience that makes it worth facing him in a game. Just watching the episode gives me some kind of idea on how cricket works. It seems like it's only slightly similar to baseball in that the ball is thrown in your direction and you hit it. Though there is another similarity in that it's more than just hitting the ball, it's about perseverance and hard work. Rusty had it pretty rough the first time he tried to hit while playing with his brother's friends. But he got the determination he needed to try again after reading a letter from his father.
As you grow up, you'll face harder things than a cricket ball, and you'll have two choices. Back away and get out, or step in front and play a full shot.
The adults have the same determination to get Rusty out. And that, my American friends, is cricket. A game of determination, perseverance.
This episode of Bluey is called Camping.
While she and her family are on a camping trip, Bluey meets a French-Canadian black lab named Jean-Luc.
Tu veux jouer avec moi? Huh? Est-ce qu'on joue ensemble?
They don't speak the same language, but they become fast friends. Every morning on the camping trip, the two would get together, watch a seed they planted slowly grow into a tree, and plot to catch a wild boar, which is really Bandit. But they must do so by finding an effective way to communicate with each other due to their language barrier. How adorable. Two friends speaking different languages, learning to communicate to make sure they're on the same page. But one morning, Bluey awakens to suddenly find out that Jean-Luc's family had left the camping ground.
They must have left early this morning.
You mean they're gone?
I'm afraid so, sweetheart.
It's really sad when a really good friend you've known, even for a short period of time, has to leave. But the times when that special person was around were the happy parts, and that's what makes it special in the first place. It's all the happy memories connected with this person, and if you never met him at all, those memories wouldn't have existed. And who knows, maybe someday, if not in your childhood, but instead your adulthood, you may see that person again, and the memories come flooding right back.
Hello, Bluey.
If at one point the show does come to an end, I think it's going to have that same feeling for me. It's a show I won't stop thinking about, even when long gone, and the emotions connected to it will remain as strong as ever.
This episode of Bluey is called Baby Race.
This one's less for the kids and more for the parents, specifically parents who are new to, well, being parents. But veterans are sure to connect with this too. After all, this is a pretty big topic we're delving into with this episode. Chili's recounting her memories of when Bluey took her first steps. It started when she was surprised at how early Bluey rolled over.
Bandit! She rolled over! She rolled over!
But when Chili notices Judo already sitting up straight, Chili started getting a bit too competitive about going through the developmental steps with Bluey as quick as possible so she could start walking before Judo.
Oh, how good is crawling? It's better than rolling.
My knees!
I mean, wow. A feeling of pride from seeing your child take on a step so early is really stirring up a bit of trouble, isn't it? Well, that trouble mainly stuck to the healers, but it was trouble nonetheless. Chili became so dedicated to beating Judo in the baby race that she forgot how important it was for the child's steps to flow naturally. All she needed was 3 simple words from a fellow mother that also spreads itself out to any other mother that watches this show.
You're doing great.
If your child's developing slower than another child, you have nothing to worry about. Your child will walk eventually. It may even be a moment when you're not expecting it, nor do you know the reason. Nothing could be more heartwarming than that.
Maybe you just saw something you wanted.
This episode of Bluey is called Rain. This one is special in that it's the only episode to be told entirely through the visuals, with little in the way of dialogue or sound effects. Most of the audio you ever hear is just a beautiful score that accompanies a beautiful story of a child and innocent play. Fascinated by the flow of the water and how it can be manipulated by a blockade, Bluey decides to build a dam in the walkway, using her toys to stop the water from reaching the street. But as she keeps tracking mud in the house, Mom tries to get her to clean up, but she's too excited by what she's doing to have a care. It's when Mom sits down to take a breath, then looks at the blockade in progress, that she sees the innocent beauty of what her daughter is putting on display. Anytime I see a story being told in this fashion, I'm reminded of how the film industry got started. In the early days of film, there was no synchronized sound. Those were the silent films, and it's great to see that even today, there are still short films and TV show episodes that would sometimes use the visuals to tell the story and not have dialogue or sound effects. It's a sort of old traditional value that has unfortunately been taken for granted in most projects of today. That's not to say what we have now is inherently bad, but it would be nice to see this sort of thing represented more. At least we have episodes like this one which can give us that sort of feel of so long ago. Set in the modern day, but it could very well have been any time at all.
This episode of Bluey is called Sleepy Time.
This episode has often been ranked among the best episodes of the show, with quite a few saying it is the best, and for good reason. I've talked about the basics before, but what the heck, good stories are worth telling again. Bingo's feeling like a big girl tonight and wants to be able to wake up in her own bed in the morning. When her dream begins, she hatches from Earth and starts exploring the stars with her stuffed bunny, Floppy. Meanwhile, in the real world, Bingo is sleepwalking, and the others are dealing with sleep deprivation. But Bingo continues to sleep and the dream continues to unfold. While this episode does still have its share of humor, it's overall one of the deepest and most complex episodes the show has to offer. It's more than just a way to fully demonstrate just how far the animation can go in terms of its overall quality. I mean, just look at it. You don't see anything like this in any of the other episodes. But the dream itself is a story, and one of Bingo's separation anxiety, which she tries to fight in order to fulfill her goal to awaken in her own bed, but we mustn't forget Floppy. There's no getting around the fact that the most emotional moment in this episode, which is also among the most emotional moments in the whole series, is when Bingo stands on Mercury talking to the sun, which represents her mother's soothing voice.
Remember, I'll always be here for you, even if you can't see me, because I love you.
But the defining moment of this episode is at the end, when no one in the house is in their own bed in the morning except for Bingo. It deserves the reputation it gets as not just one of the best episodes of the show, not just one of the best episodes of an animated kids show, but one of the best episodes to any TV show of all time.
I'm always here if you need me. This episode of Bluey is called The Sign.
This was probably one of the most anticipated Bluey episodes of all time, simply due to its runtime. It's not twice as long as the average Bluey episode, not 3 times, but 4 times the length, 28 minutes.
Wait, what?
If the people behind the show really spent that much time working on it, it had to have been really well worth the wait. However, I'm afraid I won't be doing this episode justice in only 1 minute, or heck, even 2. So for now, I'll keep it as brief and spoiler-free as possible. As you probably expect, there's a lot this episode throws at you. Signs point to the return of an old friend, a bit of romance, and a huge adventure. Though let's also remember that this episode takes place immediately following Ghost Basket, so one of the key elements is that the house is up for sale and Bluey's not happy about it.
What? What happens next?
If you want to find out what else happens in this episode, you might want to watch it yourself. Besides, I only got such a short span of time to talk about this episode for this video, so if you want my full thoughts, it's really best to watch my separate video review of The Sign. It's longer, it's more detailed, and delves into the deeper aspects of the episode. For now, all I will say is that this episode was hard to rank, considering it's much longer than the others, but I think I put it in a reasonable spot. The wait was killing us, but it was a wait worth dying for.
This is the best day of all my life.
Just think, in the 5 years this show has been on the air, we've seen so much from it. We've seen simple child's play, positive parenting roles, an innocent nature, realistic situations, emotional payoffs, hard-hitting topics, and brilliant writers and voice actors behind it all. We've just finished the 3rd season, and while we're as yet unsure when the hiatus on the show's production will be over, we can only assume there's a bright future ahead. After all, this show's practically a global phenomenon now. It's got so much to share, and we have got to see it. It's a brilliant show, not just for kids, but single adults, parents, and even the elderly can enjoy it. It has 154 episodes to prove it. My ranking is only just one example of the show's brilliance. There's so many great episodes that it's hard to put them in order, or heck, even consider which ones to put in the top 100 and which ones not to. At least when it comes to personal rankings. If Season 4 gets finished, expect the list to be updated. But this is how the list currently stands as of April 2024. I'm sure many other episodes will come along and wow me just as these ones did. For real life.